Linn-Mar Board of Directors meeting will be called to order at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Can you please take roll to determine a quorum?
Buckholz.
Here.
Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Rollinger.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Wall.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present at 5 o'clock.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
The motion by Rachel and a second by Sandra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, tonight we're going to kick off our meeting with special recognition of our robotics and esports teams. And so I will hand it over to Associate Principal Kim Buelt.
Thank you very much for having us tonight. We're excited to introduce a couple of our clubs that have done exceptionally well this year. So I'm first going to bring in our esports clubs. You have to come in and stand in front of the screen. Come all the way. This way. Front and center.
About halfway.
All right. Thank you. Perfect. So we've had over 100 students participate in Linn-Mar Esports this year. There are 3 seasons. I didn't even know that for esports. Fall, winter, and spring. I didn't realize it was split into 3 things. Each session lasts about 8 weeks with a game each week. There's also a state championship meet for each game title and each season. So in a little bit, I'm going to tell you about several of our teams that got state championship recognition. So these students, plus many more, have 1 in-person practice a week and 1 in-person match versus roughly 90 other schools that participate in the Iowa High School Esports Association. The matches are played either at the high school in the library or at the Esports Graphic Design Lab over here in the LRC. Our students participate in person but play against other schools online. Students also schedule their own practices outside of the normal practices. So I'm going to introduce a couple groups here and the awards that they got. So if you were a member of one of those groups, give us a little wave, okay? So the Varsity League of Legends earned a state championship award this year. Varsity Smash Brothers, nice, earned another state championship award this year. Remember, they have 3 seasons and multiple awards, so that's how we can have multiple state champions. Rainbow Six Siege, okay, coach, was a state runner-up this year. Varsity Overwatch was a state champion this year, and Varsity Rocket League was a state qualifier this year. Coach that too. So Brian Johnson kind of oversees the program, and the teams are also coached by Grady Fincham, Alex Stewart, Zach Mixdorf, and Hunter Green. So please, a little round of applause for our esports team. Now you have to turn around and wave at the camera. Wave at the camera. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And then next up, we're going to recognize some of our robotics teams.
Right on up towards me.
Right in the middle here, guys.
Right in the middle.
Perfect.
Here we go. Awesome. Yep, right there is good.
Well, can I stand across straight
You
this
just
way?
got to stand there, and I'm going to tell all the wonderful things about you, okay? So this year we had about 30 students compete on one of our 3 First Tech Challenge teams and another 12 students that were on our first robotics competition team. So we have 4 different robotics teams at Linn-Mar. First Tech Challenge begins in early September, and students quickly get to work designing and building robots for the season's new games. There's rules sent out each year, the parameters change. Our 3 FTC teams each build different robots that performed well in this year's challenges. Each team had multiple programmers contributing to the code and multiple students working on the CAD models. They also had to test their skills in areas of communication, planning, and teamwork. Now I'm going to say a little something about each of our teams, so if you're a member of one of the teams, make sure you wave, okay? So first up, Dark Matter. Anybody Dark Matter? Okay. Dark Matter made a custom robot that used camera input and passive wheels with sensors to follow a predefined path on the field. They put together a solid record of success at all of their events this year. Alato, did I say that right? No, okay. But they made an elevator and claw robot, and after a few mates, they decided to miniaturize their robot to be more maneuverable, and then they successfully competed with that smaller design. Lost in Time is our all-freshman team. They chose a unique extending arm design for their robot. After a slow start to the season, they kept working and improving, ended up winning their league championship event. They made it all the way to the state tournament and had a good showing there. Our first Tech Challenge teams came away with 2 awards then, so of those 3 groups, they got a design award for dark matter and an innovative award for lost in time. And lastly, our first robotics competition teams are the Iron Lions. They started their competition season early in January. They worked many hours in a short amount of time to design a robot before their first competition in March, which was in St. Louis this year. This year they kept the robot design simple and made the most of it. They were Alliance captains in St. Louis, and then their 3-team Alliance finished 3rd place in the region out of 43 teams. They worked hard over spring break to make improvements ahead of the Iowa Regional, and then they achieved their goal of adding auto balancing capabilities and becoming a higher scoring team overall. The teams are currently finished, but they are staying busy with summer camp preparations and already looking forward to a even better year next year. The teams are coached primarily by Danny Metello and Jerry Behrens, and then they have several mentors from the community that join them as well. So a big round of applause for our robotics.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you.
And thank you again for the opportunity to always recognize our students. It means a lot to all of us. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mrs.
Kim.
Bell.
Thank you.
I do want to recognize we didn't want to bring them all back in again because at our last meeting they were here, but our varsity show choir did place first and were grand champions at the National Show Choir Competition in Nashville at the end of March. So first time they win. All right. Next up, we will have a public hearing regarding the updated HVAC plans and specifications for the new administrative building. Is anyone here this evening to speak specifically about the updated plans? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. On our informational reports, first up we have our elementary level student services and teaching and learning report. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to that team.
All right, good evening. My name is Michaela O'Connell. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Education for this great district. I get the privilege of kicking off this presentation, being with the littles on a regular basis. We want to show you a continuum of when students enter our school district to what they receive on their way all through the elementary spectrum. These numbers are just a glance at what our enrollment numbers are this year. They ebb and flow as students move in through our system, and then we add more students as the years go on. So we have the capacity to have 176 general education peers. We have 8 classrooms across our district housed out of Bowman, Echo Hill, Lynn Grove, and Wilkins. And we also have 2 high-quality partner programs housed out of Hand in Hand on 35th and Barrington. All of those classrooms have high-quality standards, and I'll get into what their curriculums are moving forward. We also, in our district programs, so the ones that are housed within our buildings, are unified classrooms. So our teachers are amazing. They are our general education teachers and our special education teachers. So each classroom has the capacity to have 11 general education peers and up to 5 students with IEPs that are above communication needs and warrant a classroom placement. So they truly are an amazing team. Then our partner programs can each have 40 kids in each building. So they have 20 in the morning and 20 in the afternoon, but they are not our unified program. So that's what those numbers are. And it also shows the capacity for what we have for students coming into special education. So when you see how many kids we can have, that's where that discrepancy lies, is we always have that buffer as we have kids come in. They come in really young, right when they turn 3, and we exit some kids because they make a lot of progress because of our inclusive practices. And so we always kind of have that room for the teachers so they're not too bogged down or able to provide quality services to all of our students. Our other early childhood program that we have within our district is our junior kindergarten, or our alternative kindergarten. So this is for kids who are turning 5 within a certain time frame that we provide as a district. And what we're trying to do is your chronological age impeding your ability to learn developmentally alongside peers? So we look at social emotional, it's that self-regulation. Can you sit? Can you go get your materials and come back down? and do your work. Literacy and mathematics are things that we look at as well during the screening process. So this will show you what our numbers were last year. So we screened 71 students, which was down from the year before, but we had 64 qualify. And then we have families that accept the spot or choose to decline the spot. So they may get the screening results and say, hey, we're just gonna go to kindergarten, or they may move out of the district for various reasons. So that's where you see the ebb and flow in those numbers. We just had a really successful screening process on the 31st of March and the 3rd of April. We screened 76 kiddos within our district and also outlying districts. So we can now accept open enrollment. So kids from other districts can also come and benefit from our quality junior kindergarten program. And we're waiting, so they have a timeline until tomorrow to accept or decline that spot. So we already have some families that have said, yes, we'll take it, and some that said, you know, that's great, but you know, we're gonna send them on to kindergarten. And we have 3 of those classrooms right now, and they're all housed out of Nova. So this is the difference. We often have people ask the difference between the two. The foundation for Little Lions is creative curriculum. So it is a curriculum that outlines what the environment should look like, what the teaching should look like, how many minutes you should be doing of each area. And then we have been kind of teetering with different things across the years as we look at data and how kids are improving or not improving. This year was our first year to actually use across our early childhood programs the Haggerty pre-kindergarten curriculum. And we've seen a lot of great growth and foundational skills. And our hopes is then when they move into the K-4 system, they have the phonological foundation to be able to take on the curriculum that they're getting at the kindergarten level. We use Second Step for how we teach self-regulation, executive functioning, and controlling our emotions, or when you have them, what do you do? And then we follow the Iowa Early Learning Standards. For junior kindergarten, it's a switch because it is early childhood, but we actually follow Iowa Core. So we have expectations, we have essential standards, but we take that into account of what do we want them to be able to do at the end of junior kindergarten. So they're going into kindergarten prepared, but not necessarily they're going to be boarding kindergarten. So that's where a lot of that comes from. And that team has worked really hard to really essentially piecemeal their curriculum. So they have taken quality research-based curriculums and resources and put them together and created essential standards around literacy and math to develop their program. And sometimes we just think a video and some music is the best way to show you what we do in our programs. And so here goes technology. We're hoping this works. I don't want to ruin anything. Thank you. There you go.
Hi everyone, I am Melissa Tandy and I'm currently the Associate Director for Student Support Services and I support our 7 elementary buildings. So pretty much everything that maybe isn't directly curriculum, I am out supporting our building with that. And then Shannon, I'm just going to take this opportunity. Come July, I will be shifting into the executive role and we will be kind of restructuring our department to cover as you can see, JK all the way through 21 plus. And I know you've met Megan before. So I'm just gonna touch briefly on some of the numbers on the elementary, and then Carla's gonna dig a little bit deeper. As you can read up there, we just provided you a snapshot of what it looks like just demographically and the basic numbers. A couple of the things that I really wanted to point out from a student support services seat as we support our elementary schools is one of the things that I am incredibly proud of is the fact that we have approximately 30, and I put approximately 30 student support special education teachers in our district. We have been fortunate last year and this year to be able to take advantage of some mid-year hiring of students, teachers who have been in our district or people that are looking for a job in January. We've been able to use them to fill in kind of that influx that comes in the middle of the year and then be able to have them be teachers. So actually, as we look forward to the hiring season at the elementary level in particular and really across the district in terms of student support services, special ed, we're actually ahead of the curve and kind of looking how do we deploy our staff, not how do we start looking and hiring those staff that aren't out there in the workforce right now to hire. So I feel really excited and less anxious. It's more like where are we gonna put them instead of do we have enough? Also, one of the other things, and I had checked with Carla on this, that I am incredibly proud of and I think this district needs to be proud of is when we look at student support services, special ed teachers, across Grant Wood, the average is each year we take on 50% of the new teachers that come into that role are not completely certified to do the job that we're hiring for. Every one of our teachers is fully certified. We do not have any teachers at the elementary level in particular that are on a conditional license. We do have a few, but it's not nearly the number that we see across the area. And I think that speaks volumes for this district and the support that we provide in the quality of education. People are wanting. We are getting phone calls of people wanting to apply. That's not always the case, but that's pretty exciting. And then just as you look at it, we're also able to provide those other services, the counselors, student assistants, health, ELL, and I couldn't even list all the other staff that are out there in our buildings every single day, whether it's the transportation every morning and the attendants to the cooks to the secretaries to everyone that's in those buildings supporting our kids. Michaela showed you the video. I will tell you when things are not always the smoothest and I'm maybe frustrated with something, the first place I go is to our elementary school and go into a classroom and find whether it's the preschoolers who want to know if I want a high five or a fist bump or just a wave or any of those, because that's why we do what we do. And our role is to support all of those individuals that are in our district and families, as well as the work and the learning that's going on. So I'm going to let Carla jump into the learning at the elementary.
All right. I'm Carla Reese. I'm the Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, as they referenced a couple of times already. And I just want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight. It's exciting to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing at the elementary. And I want to kind of reference to a metaphor that Shannon used with our staff at the beginning of the school year. He talked about every vehicle has a rear view mirror and a windshield. However, the windshield is bigger for a reason. So as we reflect on where we've been, he really encouraged us to focus on where we're going. Look forward, where do we want to be, how are we going to continue to move Linn-Mar forward. So that is what I want to share with you guys tonight and some of that work that we've done. So I have to bring long notes. They all brought like little notes. I'm a little jealous of that, but anyway. So as we think about looking forward across the district K-12, we employ Dr. Robert Marzano's high reliability school framework. And I know you've heard about this in the past, so I'm not going to really dwell on that. But one of the things is we dove into looking at level 2 and level 3 a little bit deeper and thinking about what do we need to do to push ourselves forward as a district in those levels. What came to mind really was having materials that were tightly aligned with the Iowa core standards, as well as instructional practices that are research-based. So that's where we landed and where we really, really focused. So over the last couple of years, we've updated our materials at the elementary level, both in reading and in math. And for those of you that know me, I could talk about reading and math most of the evening. However, I will spare you that conversation. And I thought it would be more valuable if you actually heard from our teachers. So I actually have 3 videos that I want to share. The first is we'll start with kindergarten teachers and transition to some 4th grade teachers, talking a little bit about their instruction and the materials. So I think that you will find that helpful, and then we'll go back to the students.
We just have to say the reading, that one, since we started our new curriculum, I've been so excited about. I've been here over 20 years, and this is the first reading curriculum that I'm excited to teach every day and open the page and get to, reveal the new character and teach the new lesson.
The program incorporates so many foundational skills of the phonological awareness, the phonemic awareness, that a lot of times those kids that come in with the reading are missing some other skills that need to be supported in order for them to continue to be successful.
And it really works on listening comprehension too.
That they come in as readers, they really get that other underlining foundational skills to help them even be a stronger reader than what they already come in as. And it gives the kids that come in with little experience the chance to be able to master letter names, letter sounds, and put it all together to become a reader. So
Everyone
it's
feels
amazing.
successful.
Right.
It is amazing to see how it really supports all students across the board and helps them be successful in reading and writing.
The children are really excited to meet the characters. They're their age. They relate to them, their interests. It's engaging. And I really like the handwriting piece, K1-2, because it is universal. So K1-2, we're all using the same language. It's fun for them because it's put into an ice cream scoop. So they understand the strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. So they can relate to that. And they'll hear it in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. So I know we've always wanted something where we're all saying the same language and it goes on to the next grade level.
I really like Super Kids because a former colleague of mine used to always say how it goes slow to go fast, and I think Super Kids really allows all students, whether they're just coming in with no preschool experience or they come in as a reader, that it gives them that chance to really master the skills that we are teaching. It kind of goes slow with each letter sound, gives all students the chance to master those skills and really put it in practice. And once the school year goes on and builds upon itself, they really develop those reading skills that they need to become a really strong reader, and it provides them that foundation to really have those foundational strong reading skills that they need to be successful in reading.
I agree, and building those, like how they build it. So we start with letter sounds, and then we go to the blending book. And then I'm just amazed now how they can take those decodable readers and you can talk about the story, you can make connections with the story, and they're still only using the letter and sounds that we've learned.
The transfer of those reading skills to their writing has been really amazing. And I
That
think
explicit
it's
teaching, I think at the beginning is so important for each sound, and how to manipulate it with whether it's beginning sound, ending sound, middle sound. So you do so much with that sound, and then how they'll use it as it grows, like you said.
And it
The growth
incorporates
is huge.
all those foundational skills that are so important in kindergarten that then build upon in 1st grade and in 2nd grade. That
They're in every lesson.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's very structured. The kids know what to expect. They know the routine. And it's amazing the engagement that they
piece is
truly
huge.
have with the Super Kids and learning reading because of the characters. That
And across grade levels, talking to brothers and sisters, neighborhood friends,
Right. Yeah.
and even seeing 1st grade if they walk by a classroom. Oh, I know those Super Kids, and just recognizing the characters, and so the engagement and the excitement for reading and the books that they pick up. And the super smart lesson that often correlates with social studies or science. So
They love that.
the nonfiction piece of that's presented.
and how it's interactive. That they
Amazing to watch the kids do their own work together, and it's just been an amazing experience.
Well, and I think we talked that with our previous curriculum, we taught a lot of skills for a short period of time, And now with our new curriculum, we're able to really dig in and
Go into depth.
go in
of all the
depth
skills.
with one story. Instead of switching the story every week to teach new skills, we're sticking with the same story, but teaching the skills deeper.
I feel like the kids feel the success that they're having with that. It's not a one and done. It's they see the point of I'm doing this because it's going to help me with the next thing, and everything connects back together with every skill, and they feel success, which I think is important.
They get really excited learning things at that deep of a level, you know, because we're staying with the same text for an extended period of
One of
time.
the things we love is the complexity of the mentor texts.
Like the circulatory story, I think at first there's so much good information that the kids get to learn about the heart, and at first it seems like a lot of information at them, but then we pull it apart piece by piece and we read it whole group, and then they get to reread it together in small groups, in pairs, and really dig deep and get a lot of learning out of that, and then apply it to all of those literacy skills in writing. And so everything really pairs well and works well together.
Even my first,
I love the student writing. I love the graphic
It's amazing.
organizers. I love the context, the evidence, the elaboration. I think it lays it out so that the kids can gather their ideas, and it's very targeted.
there's a real formatting to it, like do an introductory paragraph and how to do a concluding paragraph, and they learned step by step, whereas before it was just kind of like we were teaching those things, but not at this depth.
Well, and I think too, it helps that they have to find the context, and then they go back in the story to find the evidence, which
I think a big part of that writing is also the in-class discussions that we have. And there's so much valuable discussion that takes place that it's easy then for the kids to transfer those thoughts into the writing, because we've already talked about a lot of this stuff, and they're coming up with better, longer sentences that really reflect a higher skill in writing. And it being about a boy who doesn't like poetry, kind of goes through a transformation throughout the course of the book into being a poet, which
A writer.
a writer. And there were a lot of my students that felt like they could relate to that, and a lot of really good, interesting poetry and discussion came of that book specifically.
I've never had success like that with poetry in the past.
Well, I think to conference time when parents came in talking about what we were reading and how excited their student was coming home to share, like, because I think at that point we were doing circulatory stories, how many parents commented on the fact their student was coming home so excited learning about the heart, and would go home and talk about the heart
With
and all the components.
reading being structured the way it is, it really lent itself to having really in-depth math discussions as well. And while we did start off this year tackling some of the hardest concepts like fractions this year, we definitely feel it paying off later on in the year as things progress and we learn other skills outside of just fractions.
And then they really feel empowered for their own learning and they take ownership of it, which I think is huge.
Well, and I think too with the math, one of the things that I really appreciate is that when the kids are talking, they have to explain their thinking, you know, and they're willing to share that out. But I think in the past, they showed us their work. There wasn't that explanation that I fully understand the concept. And so I think that has been a huge shift with this curriculum too, is them being able to articulate, what did I do? This is how I got from point A to point B. It might not be how I thought of it or your partner thought of it, but you're able to articulate it, and you know, I think that is amazing to hear.
When it comes to deeper level thinking and critical thinking skills, I feel like this curriculum is very good at facilitating those kinds of discussions and that level of understanding that comes with that. So.
Okay, I know that was a bit long, but I thought that the information they had to share with you was pretty valuable. The next video is actually just very quickly some kindergarten students engaging with the Super Kids. And then it goes to 4th grade, and you can hear the students' thoughts about the materials as well. It's not as long, I promise.
Goodness gracious, specialty, golly, it would be good for me. That is what we need, and the economy. Oh, yes. Hickory, hickory, my name is Doc. Hickory, hickory, Doc. When the seeds style is playing, I like every corner. we dig a lot deeper than we usually would.
Okay. So can you give me an example what you mean by dig deeper?
So like we like dig into like the character of like feelings and like what like the book means to them. Like when we read the book, like love that dog, we like dug into Jack's like character.
Sure.
Instead of like just saying, oh, Jack doesn't like poems at first and then he likes poems, and we actually like explained.
I also like that we learned about the literal and figurative part.
The literal and figurative part was actually very fun. I liked learning about the real heart, and then we actually got to read about when in Love That Dog. It was very interesting to read about Jack and his dog and how he writes poetry, and that was really fun. I like what in wisdom because when we got to read a book, we got to write about it, like what he was saying, and we got to like we stayed on that book, and we like would go back and like reread parts of the book.
I like that we learn lots of ways how to do it instead of just one or two ways of how to do the like multiplication or division.
Yeah, and the teacher doesn't talk all the time. It's the kids, they get to talk too. And when you have groups, so one person might have one way of getting to the answer, and another person might have a different way, and then you end up with two good ways to get the same good answer.
The teacher used to lead it all, but now the kids do a lot of stuff, so the teacher isn't just doing it all, and it's harder, and it helps us learn more.
The thing I like better about math is like we can like talk with our table group, because like on everyday math we kind of have to do it alone.
Okay.
And I like illustrative math because we got to like we do it and then we like partner up maybe, and then we like write our answers on the whiteboard.
For math, this is kind of like Lillian's. I like how like we actually cooperate more this year instead of last year. So you like talk as a table group, you work as a table group instead of by yourself, and you don't really talk.
Okay. I love what they have to say. They're so honest. And then the last video. So really, where the most important work happens is with the students, right? Like the work they produce. And so you heard the 4th grade team talk about poetry and the unit they did on poetry. One of the activities was a response to a poem that they wrote, and they called it an exploded moment. So the students were supposed to add detail and adjectives and kind of make the whatever moment they chose to write about kind of pop off the page for the reader. And so this student, and she's very soft, so I apologize for that, but this is her assignment, and I thought she's 4th grade.
I trot down to the woods on my horse Holly. Her hoofs clank on the gravel, but the sound fades to a heavy snow crunch. She stops in her tracks, fluttering her lips at the forest. I gave her a pat on the mane, reassuring her it was okay. The snowflakes fluttered down soft as a feather. The air was frosty, and the coverage of my coat blocked the feeling from the snow gently falling into a cold melt. I dismount Holly, leading her to the cabin. I go inside to await the sunrise.
So that was her poem that she wrote as a result of that. So, which I thought was super impressive for 4th grade. I'm not sure I would have that ability to write something that well. So that is kind of our presentation. So from the teacher perspective and the student perspective and all the way down to the student work for the work we've kind of done for level 2 and level 3 of Marzano's framework. We have one last just little quick fun video to share with you, and then we will be on our way. Or not. That one doesn't seem as agreeable. Okay. And that is our evening. So, do you have questions or?
We'll talk. talk about how, like, in our visits to all the elementaries, you know, each building is very unique, and but at the same time, you know, how do you ensure that there's a consistent experience between the buildings while also making sure that they get to maintain what makes them unique?
That's always the challenge. One of the ways is that high reliability school framework. So that's one way. And when we think about that guaranteed and viable curriculum, all of our schools use the same materials. They receive the same professional learning. But it's not, the teachers still have to make it their own. So for example, you couldn't just pick up the teacher manual and like read it. You have to kind of plan for that, and so they still have to use the art of teaching, so to speak, but the consistency comes from the standards, from the Iowa Core standards, and it comes from our materials, and it comes from our professional learning. So you might go to any building, but you'll see the same types of things, but how it's delivered might look just slightly different.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Just a quick question. I see that we have implemented 2 new curriculums in a single year, which is a lot.
Yep.
I just wonder what supports have been available to teachers at this level, since they are doing all of that teaching themselves, not completely themselves, but you know, they're responsible for both the literacy curriculum and the math curriculum. So I'm curious about that.
So our K2 teachers implemented Super Kids last year. So for them, this is their second year of implementation of that. But illustrative math is new to K4 this year. However, teachers were given the option to implement that this year if they wanted. So our 3rd and 4th grade teachers who knew they were getting new ELA had that option of, do you want to tackle 2 in a year or not? And so most chose 2. But the biggest support has been our math strategists and our instructional coaches in helping them like work out the bugs, or maybe they've demoed a lesson, or they've collaboratively planned with them. Those are all things we've donated or dedicated all of our professional learning to either literacy or math for those materials specifically. So for example, on our last PD day, we had 3rd and 4th grade teachers do kind of a module study or a preview of what is upcoming, and then they have the majority of the time to do that. So trying to allow them the time as well as the support. And they've relied on each other. As you can see that team in the video, they rely on each other to kind of divide and conquer the work as well.
So if teachers had the option of implementation of that illustrative math, is it fair to say that we are able to guarantee all students a similar experience if they're working from 2 different curriculums?
Yes. So we have just a couple of teachers that chose not to try to do that this year. They will be expected to next year. So, and many of them, under the support of their math strategist yet this year, are trying units from that. So yeah. And the topics or the content in math, I mean, they're still teaching fractions. They're still, you know, so those things they're still working from the same set of standards. So whether the materials might look slightly different for those few classrooms, the standards are the same.
One of the things that I had heard was that that the new math is very different in certain ways, and that there is a bit of catch-up that has to go on because the order in which things are taught within illustrative math is a little different than what it was in our previous curriculum. So I guess I would just say that it's a little concerning to me that there are those teachers who haven't implemented this, because I wonder if it puts those kiddos kind of behind the 8 ball next year.
I don't think so. Otherwise, we would not have given them the option to do that. I don't think that's a concern at all, because they still are teaching that same, the standards are still the standards. That is 100%. So that is not a concern to me.
Okay.
But just because they are working from the same set of standards and have been.
Okay.
So
You bring up a really good point, Rachel, and that's what I was going to allude to as well, is the adoption of 2 new curriculums in 1 year is not our normal way of doing things at all.
Not
And
at
I don't think we'd do that again, but the timing with everything through the pandemic and the transition just made for a unique circumstances in many ways, and the curriculum piece is another one. But our teachers have been fantastic to be that flexible and committed to make it work, even though it's not the ideal way we would do things. So I don't want people to think this is the way we're always going to do curriculum adoptions, because it certainly is not. But
We really wanted to utilize those math strategies while we had them. And that was, but we also didn't want to force that. So.
What is the support plan for next year?
It'll happen again through instructional coaches and PD. We'll work closely with those few teachers who did not implement illustrative this year. We'll work with them kind of in a different capacity, more one-on-one, more collaborative planning, like at team meetings and so forth. But that we always want to monitor that implementation. Next year will be easier for them, because everything will be familiar, but we'll still continue to work to support that pretty extensively. We do that through principal PD, so they know what to look for in classrooms and are able to support teachers. We do it through PD with teachers, so a variety of different ways like that.
that'll be true with not just our teachers that chose not to implement this year, but our new
Absolutely.
teachers that come on board as well.
Yep.
New hires may or may not have this experience, this curriculum, and that's standard procedure for us then too, is to provide that training and support with our coaches, our curriculum staff, to provide as much help as we can to get them up to speed and comfortable as well.
My last question, and then
You're fine.
I think I'm done. So you mentioned that a lot of the core of this support for teachers came through the professional development this year, that all of the PD was geared towards literacy and math. So I know there's a lot of moving parts in the district, and I know that at times, not everyone, some opted not to go to those PDs to do PD on other things. How do those gaps get filled?
Typically through coaches. Or we've done so for example, most of them have come. So we did have one building that had some other training that they had to take care of. And so they still have a math strategist. That math strategist still provides support within the classroom. And we still had the resources for them, like the information from the PD.
Anybody else? Thanks, guys.
Thank you
Thank
for a
you.
good job.
Next up, board members who were able to attend the Marion State of the City Luncheon on March 8th, which seems forever ago.
Long time ago.
But for those of you that were able to attend, anything you'd like to share?
Really well attended, and it was a fun luncheon. Excited to hear the city's plans.
I think, in my opinion, we're in very good hands. They're very good partners of our school districts. The new city manager is a wonderful man, and I just think it's just an upbeat session that we were at. Listen to the mayor and keep voting for him because he's a good mayor, and I think it's good leadership. And anyway, I thought it was a good session.
It was impressive. As always, Marion is a great place to live and have our district. And the people within, at every level that I've worked with anyway, they have been great, and they continue to be. And clear down to Mayor Nick's son who introduced him, which was an excellent opportunity to see another mayor of the future, I believe. At any rate, it was a great experience.
I always enjoy hearing the city's strategies, like how they're going about making their decisions. And, they talked a lot about the focus being quality of life, that every decision they make is about what is the quality of life in Marion. And they talked about how they recruit people to come here and why people move here, and how, what did they say? It was something, so long ago I don't remember the number, but they were one of the fastest growing communities, not just in Iowa, but we have some national ranking that's pretty impressive on community growth and quality of life. And they even referenced, that quality schools are a reason that people come to Marion, and so that's a big boost for us as well. And so I enjoy hearing the strategy behind their planning and the success of the projects they've had and what they're looking towards doing in the future. So for me, that was the highlight.
Things that impressed me is that after the meeting was done, the number of people that came up to me and said, sometimes we spend our time in our own little world, and was not aware of all the things that were actually going on in our own city. And, the fact that the schools and the community are so close-knit that the growth is taking place. They can see the growth. They've got plans for the future. Like Shannon said, you look in the River of Marion, we're not looking back, they're always looking forward. And the things that have been accomplished in recently is phenomenal, and where the growth is going to go. And sometimes the will to grow is going faster than what they can get the job done. But there's so much working together between Marion and Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha, and that we're all moving together and trying to help each other out. And I think that was really impressive. But to listen to those people that said, I was not aware of this, I was not aware of that, and it's going on, but that sounds so cool that we're doing this and we're doing that. And a lot of people involved in that, and you can tell by just the number of people that show up and what organizations they represent and how they come together to help our city is really amazing. And as Britt, as you pointed out, the nation's being aware of where we stand, and I think that's good.
Any questions for any of us that were able to attend? Next up, we have 3 city council meetings. So we'll start with, I'm assuming they're in order, but who went to March 9th? And we'll start with you. Was that Rachel?
I believe that was me. Nothing specifically pertinent, more building, more liquor licenses, pretty typical.
The 23rd?
That would be me. It's interesting because I have pretty much the same thing to say. There's not anything that just jumped right out as big time, other than we're continuing to build and expand, and we have to just stay on top of it, I guess.
And then Barry, that would make you April 6th.
There were 2 items that evening, and it's right on the heels. One of them was on the heels of the Marion State of the City. They elected a new council member that evening. A person resigned, but it was interesting. They had 3 very good candidates. So I was able to sit through there basically selling themselves and telling them how good they were and whatever. And they picked a real good young man. I don't remember his whole story, but they were pretty excited to have him. And then the second item is that they talked about in great detail. They've been talking about traffic cameras, mainly on Highway 13 and on Highway 100, mainly to stop traffic. Well, the reason slow it down a bit with all the trucks coming through and all of the traffic. But the main thing they talked about was a young family of Linn-Mar lives on 29th, and they were questioning if they were going to bring any traffic cameras in there because of the proximity of the 4 schools and just the whole process. And if you ever drive on Indian Creek and 29th early morning or during the mornings or late afternoons, the traffic is quite heavy. So anyway, what they talked about was having they're going to have a portable unit that they're going to be moving around. And they asked the chief of police, is that going to be a surprise visit or is that going to be advertised? He said, absolutely not. We're going to advertise it. We want you to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. But one of the questions that the young family brought up was school buses and the number of people going around school buses. And of course, that's always going to be a problem, no matter where you live or whatever city you're in, because I don't think people feel that there's the urgency or the necessity to stop for a school bus, whether they're in the same lane or whether they're meeting them or if it's 4 lanes or whatever it is. And their comment was, and the city manager talked to me afterwards for a bit, and wanting to know if we had cameras on our arms, and I said I couldn't answer that, on the drop arms. Are there cameras on those? Or?
I don't know if all the buses have that, but I know some of them do have that. The newer ones do have that capability.
See, his comment to the young, he went out in the hallway and talked to the people that spoke that night, wanting them to understand that they're looking at it and they're working on it. But, traffic cameras are what they are. They're mainly for speeding, but to get other things is part of the process. Well, just in my opinion, the presence of a traffic camera slows traffic down. And of course, I don't understand on those busy days how you can speed on 29th anyway, because there's so much traffic. But anyway, that was a question that they had, and I assured him that I would check into it. And I was assuming we had them, but I wasn't sure. So
Follow up with Brian on specifics and share that with you too. But I know that's been, I don't know there's a huge frequency of cars passing buses with the stop arms out, but I know it does happen from time to time, and our bus drivers do everything they can to document it and give it to Brian, who then refers it to the police department as well.
Of course, a big one is your handicap buses,
issue.
especially, where people, I think, just get tired of waiting, because it does take a little bit of time once in a while to get children off and on. But anyway, I just shared with them that we would talk about it, so thank you.
Shannon, on that note, just a quick question for you. I know the last time I checked with you on this, the answer was no, but have there been any talks about how to address the traffic there at the intersection between Indian Creek and 29th and the entrance to the Indian Creek parking lot? Because it continues to be a problem that you've got cars going around those who are stopped to turn into the parking lot, and for those who are coming out of the parking lot, that really presents a great risk of an accident right there. So I'm just curious, I know we've had like a study done at that intersection, but is there anything else that we can do, at least on our part, in order to help get that working a little better?
I don't remember what year it was when that study was done, but I remember when the city council had that conversation. It was interesting because they basically came to the conclusion they realize there's a problem, but they don't really know what to do about it.
It's challenging.
And that's not the complete summary, but that was basically what I remember from it. They looked at the current four-way stop signs. They looked at adding stoplights. They looked at a roundabout. So at that time, there were pros and cons to each, and then they just kind of left it there. I've not had any follow-up with them since then. I do meet with the city manager tomorrow, though, so I can certainly add that to our agenda questions to see if there's any more conversation, because part of the problem became, if I remember correctly, some of the driveways are so closely located at that intersection that if you have a roundabout or a stoplight there, that's going to cause issues for those individuals to be able to get in and out of their driveways too. So there were legitimate concerns and challenges of why they didn't make some changes to it, but you're right, there's needs to be some more improvements made there, because certain times of day it is impossible to get through there.
Well, and I admit that it is a very challenging, due to where that entrance to the it's kind of like Bowman, right? But at least Bowman has enough space to kind of line up on the street there, but at Indian Creek, when you're waiting to turn into the parking lot, there really isn't a lot. I don't know if there's anything we can do creatively to help ease that just a little bit, but I just wanted to follow up with you about that. So if you can follow up with the city manager and kind of let me know what you hear.
Tell the parents to put their kids on a bus instead of driving.
Hey, I would put my kid on a bus if I could.
Trying to be funny, because all
now you're going to
the
get phone
schools have
calls
it.
about that.
All the schools have it, because you see it at Bowman Woods, you see it at Westfield, you see it at Wilkins. They all have the.
There's a reason I park at Towbee.
I
avoid all that craziness.
And of course, the city's going to say. The city's going to say it's just a short time. Just be patient. And
but people I remember that part of the study was that the reason they recognized that the amount of traffic could warrant a stoplight, but only for about 30 minutes morning and afternoon, and to them that wasn't enough time to put one in. And so, yeah, it's just kind of...
I mean, that could be said about many stoplights in the city, so I don't really see that as a good
excuse. It's been a number of years now, so I'm sure the numbers are probably up if they did another study, right, Jamie? Yeah. Okay.
Anything else on the 3 city council meetings? Okay. DEI committee.
All right. So the committee heard from high school students regarding the work they were doing in the area of anti-bullying, and those students have been working with the high school administrators on their efforts and presented that to the committee. There is a form that they have come up with to report bullying incidents, and this is a really cool tool that I am very excited to see implemented, and am very excited to see how what impact that has. That allows students, if they're walking in the hall and they see an incident, they can get on their phone, they can report that incident, they can give, they can give their name, they don't have to give their name. So I will be really excited to see how the implementation of that goes, and if that, the way that is designed is effective. The committee reviewed feedback from the parent and student focus groups that were conducted in February, March. So the one that I went to at the high school during the parent advisory committee, and there were a couple of others. And that there was a lot of feedback, and we'll continue reviewing that during the next meeting. And then the consultants are working on providing a document to the committee that will include the priorities and goals that align with the district's current and future strategic plan. So it's kind of all coalescing. Our next meeting is April 17th.
Any questions for Rachel? We've had 2 board visits, one to Echo Hill on the 23rd and one to Bowman Woods just last week. So if anyone wants to share their thoughts and experiences on either of those visits.
Best part of being on the school board. It really is. It's been so fun to be able to engage with the staff and the kids and hear how excited everybody really is to engage with us, and about for them to be able to share about their learning and about the process that they go through every day. The kids are always just so excited to talk and to show us their different projects, and the kids walking down the halls going, this is this project, and this is this, and this is where we did that, and like, it's just so fun, and their energy and their enthusiasm for learning is just really, really contagious. So I know that they probably picked those kids for a reason to give us the tours. Maybe not every kid in that school is as enthusiastic about school, but it's really, really fun and exciting to see how much they are enjoying their day and how much pride they have in their school and their teachers, and they just rave about their experiences. So I love it.
I'll piggyback onto that as well. It is a lot of fun, especially seeing students of your friends coming up to you and excited to see you. That is a lot of fun. I will say in the Echo Hill visit in particular, we had a really good conversation after that tour regarding the new curriculum, and and to kind of talk about some of the stuff that we discussed with the student sports services folks that were here tonight, talking about the new curriculum and some of the teachers that haven't made that transition yet. I think it will be very interesting to see how that shakes out when, and I hope we can get this information we discussed, maybe getting it on how the standardized tests look different with the new curriculum versus the old. Just, some confirmation of what we're doing, what we're bringing in, is a better choice from what we've had, and hopefully justifies why we've made that change. So I'm looking forward to that. But again, I think the fact of getting into the schools, I think everyone in the schools appreciates seeing us, the students and the faculty alike. So I appreciate them allowing us to come in and do that and disrupt their day a little bit.
I'm going to go with start with Echo Hill first. I was extremely impressed and a little dumbfounded on exactly what those little ones are doing in that school. Yeah, they were totally excited for us to be there. Yes, and it is just, like Melissa said, it's one of the best parts of being on the school board, because they come in there and they're usually sitting down at a desk or on the floor, and we come in there and they just kind of, okay, we knew you were coming, but not quite sure. And how they're engaged. Every single class was engaged in what was going on at both schools. The one thing that really stuck out is afterwards we're allowed to meet with some of the teacher leaders, and they could explain what was going on. The math was one of them. And the thing that I appreciated, how many bought into the math curriculum, how the kids were basically eating it up. And in one place, at the younger grades, I think it was kindergarten or first grade, the teacher just wanted them to recognize, okay, I have a 1 on the board and I put a 3 next to it. What does that mean? And she was looking for 13. And one girl says, that's 4. And it just, you know, they're looking at it in so many different ways. And at Echo Hill, the thing that floored me was they have some free time and they're engaging the kids in how to type, okay, on keyboards. And, you know, some of us, we learned on a thing called a typewriter, okay? So, but they were really engrossed on getting the right things, because they know the day and age that they are, and it's only gonna, that type of communication is only gonna go faster. And it's just one of those things that the skill level that they have at such a young age was extremely impressive to me. And at Echo Hill. And the thing is I asked the leaders afterwards, do we bring in special people to teach this that we weren't aware of? And no, it's just something that they have available for the kids, and if they want to get involved with it, they can, but it's just going like gangbusters, and hopefully we can get that in all of our schools. Bowman Woods, yeah, Tina March is I don't know if she's about as excited as the kids are every time we go there. I mean, she's like the Energizer Bunny on steroids, but she's so involved in what they're doing and broke everything down. The kids were totally engaged, just like at Echo Hill, and we got to see some music and got to see some art. This is a personal thing for me. My wife taught art in Cedar Rapids for 30 years. And you couldn't walk down a hallway, but there wasn't something recognizable that the students have done, either art-wise, music-wise. There was a special one there on math, and not just one place. It was just plastered all over there, and the kids could see what everybody else was doing. But it's the recognition that when people go in there, hey, I'm doing something and people are watching and seeing what we're doing. And I think that's just amazing. It's something that my wife enjoyed doing for 30 years, and even got to take some of that stuff down to College and those type of things. Afterwards, I was allowed to talk with Tina, and she was just, we're talking about math, and she was just going on and on how everybody accepted it and how the kids were, you know, finding these things out. I think I'm boring everybody. Everybody's starting to leave. But it's just one of those things that the kids were eating it up, and how the teachers had bought into it. And we walked into a PLC, Professional Learning Center, and it happened to be in math. And the lead teacher, you know, it was a former student of mine, and all these types of things are going on with this new curriculum, and not only are the teachers buying into it, the students are buying into it, and Tina could just, she was just going gaga over how happy she was at this new thing and how it was going, and you usually don't get that. It's like, okay, you've walked around the building, you saw our classroom, we'll see you later, and it's not like that, And she sat down, and actually I got to talk to her for quite some time, and it was that type of enthusiasm, we want. The kids are fantastic, and our district is, I think, the best one around, bar none. Well, as people start returning, I'll stop.
This end of the table?
The only thing I want to say is, it is just what everyone else said. It's so enjoyable to do that. And I just want to give all of the students that directed us and helped us to get where we were supposed to go was awesome. But I just want to do a heads up to Xavier at Bowman Woods, because he made a special effort to make sure I was where I was supposed to be. And he was very cute. At one point, he kind of touched me on the shoulder and very, very quietly said, "Now we are moving to the next spot. But if you'd like to stay longer, I will stay with you to make sure you can get to where you're going." So it was kind of like, quit talking to everyone and let's go. So anyway, he was very patient, as all of them were, and it was just a great experience. And of course, going to Bowman Woods, it's like going home, so it does take a while for me to get through the building. But anyway, thank you, Xavier.
I was not able to go to the Echo Hill session, but at Bowman Woods, and then I have another little thing I want to mention, but at Bowman Woods, I walk out of those sessions just fired up, because the staff and the teachers, and I said to Michelle Lake afterwards, I says, "You guys need to just kind of calm down a little bit." She said, "This is the best job I've ever had," she says. Anyway, just the passion and the excitement in our staff. And then I was very fortunate 2 weeks ago. On a Friday morning, I went to the K through second grade teachers, I think it was, over at St. Mark's Lutheran Church, and that was a work day, a teacher work day, and I was excited to see it. I came in on accident, but the fact that Grant Wood was leading the class, and just to listen to the passion in the room there. I mean, to tell you, it was Friday. That was the day that we were supposed to be at home because it was storms coming in and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was so much excitement in the room, and it just excites me just to see the teachers and the staff and everybody wants to be there, and Bob Reed brought them in, and they were lined up, and they were just having a blast. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, because it was on the heels. Then we went to Bowman Woods and saw exactly the same thing, just the passion and the excitement in every classroom. So we just have to appreciate the opportunity to go visit. So.
I'll just add two things, because I agree with everything that's been said. What I appreciate about both visits was we saw everything that we hear about in action. And I think Tina apologized about 16 times for how many classrooms we visited and how much was crammed into our hour. But we got to see every grade level, all the way preschool all the way to 4th grade. We saw all of the specials. We got to see all the curriculum, how they're using everything, and that, we hear about it here, and we talk about it, and we set goals, and we set priorities. And when I go into a school and I can actually see it in action, I can see what the PLCs look like. That's what I like to see, is the learning in action and the students and the teachers engaged with one another. I agree with Clark's comment. My second comment is with regards to Echo Hill. I was impressed that they have looked at their specials rotation and that they've carved out this 15-minute block to teach typing and all of the technology that the kids are learning in there. But when I walked out of that, my thought was, are the other 6 buildings doing the same thing? Like, are the other 6 buildings learning the same skills? And so for me, that's that's my takeaway, is that we have amazing things happening in our buildings, but I want to make sure that we're sharing those amazing things so that everyone is getting those opportunities. Because I know that that's a unique thing that Echo Hill is doing, but every kid deserves to learn how to type. And so that was my takeaway, in addition to all of the excitement and the passion, which is definitely there, and I loved seeing all the learning, but I want to make sure that everyone's having those experiences in all 7 of our buildings. So.
Carla kind of touched on that tonight, that the challenges, some of our core curriculums are very easy to have that consistency with materials, resources, trainings, but we have some buildings that are 5 sections, some buildings that are 3. The scheduling piece leads to some challenges that we're always trying to work through in that balance. And Britt and I have talked about this too, so this is something we're always trying to work to improve and be as consistent as we possibly can across the board, and it's a never-ending challenge. But the one thing I'll just mention too is, several of you mentioned these are the best parts of your day as board members, or best parts of your job as board members. It's the same with me. Those board visits are fantastic. You can't walk out of there without a smile on your face, and if you don't walk out of there with a smile on your face, it's your fault, not because of the kids or the staff, because so many good things happening and just such a fun atmosphere in all the buildings too. And this year is a little bit different. We tried to cram in all 12 schools. Well, we are cramming in all 12 visits this year. And what I'm hearing from you is that's been worth the time. And I know it's busy for your guys' days and lives to make that happen. We've got 2 more visits left, so I appreciate your willingness to make all 12 of them instead of every other year like we have sometimes too. So they're not just good for the board members and us, but also I think the buildings enjoy showing off their building and sharing all the great things they're doing. And hopefully you get to see the connection that some of you mentioned to tonight's presentation, or to middle school, high school, presented earlier, to those visits, to connect the dots on what you see versus what you hear as well. So definitely fun times to do.
Real quick stat too that I was looking at Bowman Woods I wanted to mention. The smallest class was 15 children. The largest class was either 21 or 22. You know, so we talk about that when we talk about class sizes and how many we have and all that stuff. And so I observed that really, for some reason, really close. But it was kind of interesting to me that there weren't any overloaded classes at the time. So.
Any other?
It'll be interesting to see if that continues as we have to make some changes. Hopefully our classes do not get too big.
Okay. Next up is Policy Committee. We met on Friday, and everything on the list primarily is the annual review. We did the entire 400 series. Most of it is just updating to reflect either district procedures or changing a final name from JT to Dave or things like that. So it was a pretty basic meeting, nothing too. I will mention that we did talk about, we re-reviewed Policy 504, the Student Health Services Bill. You might have remembered we talked about that back in February, and we pulled it because there was some question about the emergent care definition, and we went back. That policy is a mandatory policy. It's required by a state law, and all of the verbiage that is in that policy is from the law itself. So we did go back and review it. The emergent care is defined in the law as an unforeseen circumstance. So our recommendation, and I know we'll get to the policies here in unfinished business, but we felt that we should stick with the recommendation from our attorneys and from the state, and stick with what the state law specifically says. So that was really the only one that we have. Anything else? Questions for the committee? The emergent care situation?
No, I'm sorry. This is a different policy.
We did not discuss that policy. We're waiting until after session has ended, and we get all the guidance from any new legislation all at once the session has ended. So we won't address any of those changes until session has ended. No. Nope, emergent care.
504, not 502.
Yeah.
So.
504 that came from ISB's legal team, and we just pulled the state law and read the law and compared it and just decided to stick with what the law says.
Well,
and I mentioned to you prior that I do have a few questions on this, but I think it probably falls under the new business where it's up for vote for those questions. So I'll wait till then to discuss those.
If there are no other questions for the committee, we will move on to the legislative update. Want to go first?
I think pretty much what I shared with you in Friday's memo as far as the updates. A busy week again in the Capitol. The number of bills to follow has gotten a little more narrow after the funnel, but still a lot to keep up with. The main one, I think, is the Senate File 496. The biggest changes happened in the House. Some different wording changes that I tried to summarize best I could because there were a lot of them. So I tried to pick what I thought were the most pertinent or interesting ones in there for you. And then that goes back to the Senate this week for their consideration. So they could adopt those changes as is, move it forward, or they could have other alterations to go back and forth with it as well too. So just one to continue to monitor because it's changed a lot since the initial proposal with it too. A couple other ones that we're still continuing to monitor, the Senate File 246 dropout prevention. That doesn't impact a lot of districts, but it does us. It's still sitting there. We're hoping that does give us some extra funding options for our most at-risk students. And then the Governor's Chapter 12 flexibility bill is still, haven't seen a lot of action there yet either, but that'd be another one for us to continue to monitor. So those are kind of the three big ones for me. We'll see what things play out this week, but there's a lot more we could go into, so I don't know how much more detail you want to, but.
Narrowed down is a good choice of words. We're getting narrowed down.
And we did go through the spreadsheet, and any bill that has been marked that did not make it through the second funnel has been crossed out. Like, it's still there, but it's crossed out. And then I added a column. The very first column, it just says current status. And so if it's dead, it says dead and it's crossed out. If it says no updates, some of the no updates are crossed out because they're technically dead. Nothing has happened since January, but some of them will say no updates and it's not crossed out because it was talked about in a committee meeting in mid-March. And so I don't know if it's technically dead. According to the rules, it's dead if it didn't advance out of committee. But 67 bills, which is an unusual number, were moved to unfinished business. And so they're not dead, but they also didn't meet the requirements to stay alive, but they're just unfinished. So there's a lot of bills that are technically dead, but the language has been pulled and added to the big education bill. So there's just a lot that's just out there right now. But as we move closer through April, the budget bills have started popping up, which is typically a sign that they're getting closer to adjourning. So yeah, I don't have any other specific bills to talk about. I think you covered the big three. So, I also, on that spreadsheet, if it says Ways and Means, it still qualifies because anything from Ways and Means or Appropriations doesn't qualify under the funnel rules. So those can still be open even if they haven't talked about them yet. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to the strategic plan update. And I know we had a copy of it on our table. If you want to look at that while Shannon
So you have, it's this one here. You got multiple handouts today. This is stapled together, multiple pages. Oh, well, I'll share.
Okay. Here.
So, not sure how that happened.
I have mine from last
There we
week,
go.
so. Oh, okay.
So what you have in front of you is the outcome of the last 6 months of work. Leslie is here in attendance today too, so I appreciate her leading us through this process from way back in the summertime planning until through the fall and winter months. And then this part's taken us a little bit longer than we'd originally hoped, but I think that's been okay to make sure we give it the time it's needed. So what you have here is a draft of kind of the final version. It's still in draft form. There are some changes we still need to make, little things here and there, but I do want to highlight a couple of key things that Leslie's put together, I think, in a nice format. What you have here is a summary of everything from the beginning up until where we are now, and then some thoughts going forward. I want to start with page 2. Of course, this one doesn't have it that way.
Do you want?
You must have it stapled every other page.
That's the one you gave me last week.
This is a mess, isn't it? So page 2 should look like this. Should have the spreadsheet. You've seen this draft before.
Nope.
I don't have
This
some
is,
of those.
this is the one everyone else has, and I'll just follow along.
The person making the copies was probably me, and I probably hit one-sided instead of two-sided, so you got half of it. So my apologies right away. What that is, this is going to be hard without having that visual, so I completely apologize for that. So what I explained to you is the pages that are, page 2, what that is showing is essentially the 5 strategic priorities we identified earlier. And then underneath each of those strategic priorities is the list of the goals we have for those in year 1 and year 2. So you've seen those 5 priorities, they have not changed. The goals have become more refined. Originally we had a longer list of things or had more years. Right now we have it as year 1 or year 2, 2+ we have it identified as for those areas. So the intent behind that then is to really drive our work. We've identified a champion for each goal area. So for example, the first one is advocating for Linn-Mar. The superintendent is identified as the champion for that one, so would work with the board on that piece. So each of the strategic priorities has that person identified. They'll be the one kind of in charge of leading that work. It doesn't mean they're the only one doing the work, but they're the ones kind of making sure we stay accountable. We still stay on pace for those goal areas as well. So that's the intent behind that. And then the detail piece of it that you do not see, even if you did have all the copies in front of you, is all the work that's going to happen behind the scenes at each department or cabinet levels position to really break that down into more of the strategic goal aspects of it, the legwork portion that will be coming this fall. So those will look very similar for you to look at, to see all of that. The other key piece of it is, and hopefully maybe you have this page, let's see if we got lucky on this odd or even document, is the page that shows little boxes of step 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
There. Oh, well, we got lucky, 50-50 chance on that one. So, this is my takeaway from all of this is why I give everything to Gayla to prepare and not do it on my own. Because at one time I don't give it to Gayla to prepare, look what happens. It's messed up. So that'll teach me. So this page here shows the process going forward then. So once the strategic plan is approved, the process that Leslie's helped us to put together really breaks down, okay, once this is in place, first 30 days of each goal area, here's the work to be done, 60 days, and then check-ins throughout the year as well. And she's going to help train us to do that for each of our teams for that work. So it isn't just agreeing to the actual strategic goal areas, it's the actual work that's going to happen to make sure that plan gets implemented with fidelity next school year. This is also the page where I envision me handing this off from me to Amy. This is unique, having us do a strategic plan in the middle of a transition, but I think it could still work very well. So my goal is to get the strategic priority areas established, ready to go, and then the team detail work can happen next year, and this will be the piece that Amy will take over and work with from there. So with that said, and without you having everything in front of you, what questions do you have? So again, I apologize. That's completely my mistake and oversight. I think in the memo, I think I linked it for you.
So you
that
just
piece
use
of it
mine.
too. So.
Forgot to put this back on.
I'm the way to judge people make mistakes right now, so you feel free to get your mic turned on.
Thanks for your forgiveness. So my biggest feedback and or comment about this and looking at this piece in and of itself was that I feel like the biggest piece that is maybe still needing some refinement is in the development of some SMART goals. I like the structure, I like the main topics that we have, but what I feel like it's missing is a little bit more meat for us to be able to look back in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years and say, did we meet this, did we not, and how do we know that? Like, for example, align the social emotional learning plan, creating a culture, like the big picture stuff of how will we know if we got there and what are we trying to specifically achieve. And so I think that we might want to plan a board work session to look at
all of this and say, okay, this is where we're going. How will we know if we've accomplished that? And for us to kind of help the district to, and maybe the administrators could give us some guidance, and then maybe the board can either say yes or provide feedback to that, or maybe, I don't know if the board sets those benchmarks or if the district district administrators set those benchmarks, or if we do those jointly all together. But I do think that we need some SMART goals in here.
What you're describing is exactly what we have in the strategic priorities as we start to build them out more detail. So using the one you gave, the strategic priority 2, foster a safe, healthy, and respectful culture, we have a working draft of what the SMART goals could look like. We've not shared those with you yet because they are still very sloppy and very messy at this stage. But really that is the piece that it becomes more of each of those goal areas becomes its own document and its own action plan going forward. That's the piece we don't have anywhere level of completion ready to go yet. And that's where each of those teams would need to spend more time on that piece to get that piece established at the start of the year next year. So
would that be part of the strategic plan?
Yes, so each of the page on a plan, the one page that shows all 5 of them would not have those in there, but where it would have is the actual action plan being used to going forward with it. It would show up as far as the outcomes or the measurable pieces of it would be on there, which right now just lists kind of more broad topic areas with that. It does not have the specific pieces yet. That's still the work that needs to be done. We were finding ourselves as a cabinet getting mired in that work too much, to the point that that's what took us a long time. And then contacting Leslie and working through with her right away, she helped us pull ourselves out of that level of detail at this stage and step back to the 5 strategic areas with the goals, and then going forward to have that be our next focus area.
To add to that then, will we have that information on the 24th when we approve this, or is that still going to be in process?
Yeah, those would still be in process, because that's going to take teams some time to really dig into. So for the example, the one that you're talking about on foster a safe, healthy, and respectful culture, that's Lisa's team, Melissa's team. To really do that work is going to take them some time to get that aspect put together. So the strategic priorities of all 5 of them shown, that piece will be ready to go on the 24th, but not the detailed action plan steps necessarily. The what we're achieving will be, the how we're going to get there piece is still a work in progress.
I guess I'm not sure that I'm comfortable approving a plan that doesn't have any measurable goals in it.
I agree.
I think we need to have some high-level goals, and it doesn't need to be like to the specifics of this is how we're going to measure every single one of these, but like even on the strategic priority, maybe saying, here's our high-level strategic priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is how we will determine that strategic priority 5 has been accomplished. And then the sub-goals of that, I agree, would make some sense for the champion and that team to determine what that looks like, because there's going to be different benchmarks identified within there. But how will we need to be able to say, like, we want to go from here to here as a district, and in order to get there, that team will have to identify, here are the things that they're going to put in place, and here are the benchmarks that they're going to work toward over the next 5 years to get there. But if they don't know where they're trying to get to and what we have set as a district, then how will they know?
That's a reasonable expectation to have, and something we can work on to get that honed in by the 24th. What you're describing is really those higher overarching goal areas to help drive, and
like
then the detail pieces come from there.
Strategic priority goals, like making those maybe SMART.
So when we went to that session at ISB, I saved the handouts. We went to a session on strategic planning, and Atlantic Community School District is the one that presented their process and their documents. And when I look at how they set it up, they've got on the front of their handout is the 3 strategic priorities. But then on the back, here's the key activity, here's the action steps, here are the expected outcomes, and then they have a blank column for actual outcomes. And you know, their old model did something similar where they said, here's our priority, here's our objective, here's the key activities, and here are our measures of success. I just think that, you know, what Melissa's saying, I had the same feeling as I was reading through, that yes, our priorities are what we talked about, and the goals are here, but the goals are so broad that, you know, a deliverable of improved staff retention and turnover data, that is so broad that anything could be considered a positive on improved staff retention and turnover data. Like, what are the specific things, even if they're very broad, or even if they're larger goals, they still need to be specific so we can say, this is our goal, this is how we're going to measure that success. And it's a living document, so as we're living the document, if we need to adjust that because of things we've learned, that's fine. But I do think that we need, as a board, to say, these are our expected outcomes as the board, these are the priorities we've set, go forth and tell us what your plan is to achieve it. That's what I think needs to be, that's the missing piece for me.
I also have just a little bit of concern here. I don't think it's 100% ready to go prime time just yet. I feel like on the deliverable side, we're not there. I think, you know, we look at those strategic priorities and those goals, that looks great, but it's a little more esoteric. And for those people who have not sat in on our strategic goal planning or those cabinet meetings, I want the community to be able to read that and say, you know, that's something that we're going to be doing, and that's something that we're going to be doing, and that's something we're going to be looking at. And I feel like if they look at this right now, that's not, you know, I don't know that it means enough to them that they can really understand what we're trying to do. And I think that that is really, really important, because we want that community buy-in, and we want that community support. So yeah, I just don't think it's quite ready, and I would definitely want to see what you guys have been working on in terms of those more specific goals before I would be prepared to vote yes on it.
And that's why we do not have this as an action item tonight, because we knew it is not a final product yet. So
I'm looking at your 100-day plan. And in that, it talks about the strategic plan to come to completion and for approval on the 24th. But then it jumps forward and says this will be completed upon final approval and completion of the final product. So that's the communication part of it. So after the 24th, is there more developmental yet on that? Or what are we, I mean, I'm on the same page as everybody else is. I'm just trying to visualize.
I don't think this is going to be ready to approve on the 24th.
And it may not be now. That timeline can certainly be adjusted for that piece. But the communication piece doesn't happen until the plan is finalized, essentially.
Yep.
So
And if we don't bring this forward again until the May 8th or the second time in May or something, if we need to wait, we need to wait. Because the rest of it then, when it's more organized, the rest of it will fall in place quicker.
It's important to know if you have a goal, how are you going to get there? And the how part, you know, is what most people will understand and be looking for. And I think that's a key. The 24th, after the comments that I've heard so far, it's not close to be ready and to go the way I see it.
We'll go back to the drawing board a little bit with some things and come back on the 24th and see how far we get. And if we need another session after that, we'll do that as well. So
Sounds good.
There's nothing magical about the 24th as a date.
One more question that it might have been answered when we met with Amy. Has she been involved with the strategic plan?
I've shared this document with her, but that's as far as we've gotten. She and I meet on Wednesday, so we'll go through in more detail with her then.
Yeah, I think it's important for her to be able to have some feedback in this, so maybe even inviting her to a session so that she can be actively involved in finalizing this, if that's an opportunity.
Maybe that's our work session. Maybe the 24th is the work session, and we talk with cabinet members, we talk with, you guys share what you've been working on in the specific areas, we invite Amy, and we have that more in-depth conversation about the board expectations now that you've gotten it this far. And this is an impressive, I mean, this is a good document. We can see the progress that's been made. I think we're just to that point where now we have to decide how we're going to do what we've said we're going to do.
We fine tune it and then put it into language that the community will be able to understand and see, what does this actually mean? What's the district trying to do here?
We want Amy coming in ready to go instead of being surprised by things that she's not aware of.
Sorry, are you able to get the rest of the document to us, or was it in our email?
Either way, I'll get it to you after night, regardless.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yep.
that'll be awesome.
We should have been there, access on the memo on Friday.
was
but,
gonna say
It was
if
linked
you
in the
were
memo.
not,
I remembered
I
seeing
was-
it, but
yeah.
I just want to say really, really quick, if Amy is not able to be at a meeting on the 24th, I think that it would be reasonable to push it out and wait till a time that she is available. I do think it's important to kind of bring her into the fold here. And, you know, Shannon has kind of been leading that, but she's going to be taking, you know, the reins here. And I think it is important to get some feedback from her because she's the one who's going to be trying to implement those deliverables. So what does that look like for her?
She's planning to be here on the 24th. I know.
Oh, is she? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Great.
While we're talking about the plan, just kind of as a reminder of where this all started, as we're thinking about the measurables and what we want to see, this started with the board setting our own goals a year and a bit ago. And, you know, starting to use those ISB board standards, and we're using the administrative standards. And so we've aligned our priorities originally with the standards that we picked and prioritized. And when this is all said and done, what we should be able to do going forward is say whatever's on the agenda should be able to say this pertains to this priority area. This is why we're having this conversation. And, you know, the board started this process last January, and when we finish it, it's going to provide a structure for the next 5 years. And I think that that's another thing to remember is we want to set these goals and have these targets because we set standards for ourselves, and we want to make sure that we're creating a structure that allows the rest of the district to kind of fall into that and follow it through.
Completely agree, because once we get our goals established and strategic priorities established, then department and building goals align with those as well. And that's the system we talked about a year ago, and I think we're still heading that direction. So good feedback. We'll do some more work and bring it back to you on the 24th, at least as an update, if not farther.
thank you.
Thanks for getting this far.
Sounds good.
All right, moving on to our budget update. Tonight we are talking specifically about the budget cuts. And before we dig in, Shannon asked me to remind us that we're talking about areas, not people. People, we're not talking about any thing like that. We're very focused on areas. Shannon, it's all yours.
As Britt said, tonight, nobody wants to talk about budget cuts. That's never a topic anybody ever wants to address, but it is the reality of everybody's life and experience, and that's where we're at right now. About a year and a half ago, JT stood up there and talked about the budget situation and what the projections look like for this upcoming school year, and those projections turned out to be pretty accurate with everything, so there has not been a lot of surprises. Under board policy, our goal is to never let solvency ratio dip below 7%, and we are healthy above that right now. Next year's target and the year after's target start to dip close to that and potentially below that. So that's been our work for the last several months, is to make sure we make necessary adjustments in our budget so that does not happen. The biggest challenge we have in our budget right now is the loss of ESSER funds from the federal government at the end of this school year. Those funds were intended for us to help us get through the pandemic. They were vital for us to do that, and those funds have helped us from a physical standpoint to an academic support standpoint. Those resource and positions have been fantastic. But now that we're moving past the pandemic, those funds will be extinguished by the end of this year, so that's one of our first things we look at, is how much of an impact that has on our budget. So when we started this discussion back in January, the targeted amounts have evolved a little bit, and they've evolved a little bit to the better for us, as we've discussed. But what we're looking at for next school year is $2.25 million of budget cuts for the 23-24 school year, and $1.5 million of budget cuts for the 24-25 school year. So that puts us at $3.75 million of budget reductions that we're looking at. As I've talked to each of you about this, I want to go a little bit higher than that to ensure that our estimates are conservative and that we are not having any surprises or things we did not prepare for, and then Amy has to deal with that right away next year as well. So what I'm looking at is 10% over that 3.75 million, so it puts it at 4.125 million. That's the target number we've been working towards this plan. As Britt mentioned, as we talked tonight, and we've run through this entire thing, this process, we are doing everything we can to cut everything through attrition, especially over a 2-year time frame. I think that's a much healthier way. That way we are looking at literally positions and not people. And that is, it's not fun cutting positions, but it's certainly better than cutting people. And that's been our priority through this entire process, and having that 2-year planning window makes this a lot more feasible for us to do that. So what you have in front of you, just a 1-page summary of what we've been talking about. I met with you in small groups a month or 2 ago. There's been a few little changes on this as some of our numbers have changed a little bit, but the basic format of it should look very familiar, and details should look very similar to what we talked about. I'll highlight a couple of the key pieces that we are looking at right now. As I mentioned, the biggest change for us is the loss of ESSER funds. So math strategists are 100% funded with those positions, those funds. So those positions are looking to be eliminated. Early separation, the board made a decision earlier this year to offer that for our teachers. That is about a $545,000 savings for next year for the 18 teachers taking advantage of that. So that's a huge asset for us as well. The next largest item on the list, or one of the 3 largest items on the list, is we are looking to reduce elementary sections for next school year. That is never a fun thing to do, but as I've shared with you in the past, a couple people over here mentioned, I think Barry and Sandra both did, about class sizes for the future. Anytime you look at reduced sections, class sizes theoretically go up. But the real positive for us, that right now our class sizes, we've kept them very low the last 3 years because of the pandemic, to try to encourage social distancing, and then also allow teachers to have smaller class sizes to provide the necessary support and instruction they need. So our class sizes this year between kindergarten and 3rd grade range between 19 and 22 is our average class size. If we reduce 8 sections for next school year, which sounds like a lot, but over 7 elementary buildings, that's 1 per building roughly, those class sizes would escalate to 20.6 to 23.4 with that same group of kids moving up a year. Still, I think those are very healthy numbers for us. I went back to our last normal year of class sizes pre-COVID, the 2019-20 school year. Our class sizes then range from 21.6 to 24.1 in those grade levels. So we are still almost identical to those, or even a little bit better than those numbers at that time. So that makes me feel a little better on anytime you talk about cutting class sizes, that's a large concern for it. I'll step back a second. The ESSER funds with the math strategist position, we've all seen the value of the math strategists, and I knew 2 years ago when we added those positions, it was going to be a really hard time to ever let those positions go, because anytime you add value, it's tough to take it away. But without those funds, that's just the reality of our budget situation. But in my mind, those funds serve their purpose. They helped us for 2 years provide support for teachers and for kids to be successful, and for our teachers to be successful with the new math curriculum. So now the challenge becomes, how do we function in a successful manner without those? We rely back to our coaches to supporting our teachers, our curriculum staff, our administrators, teachers to help each other with that, their PLC process, the supports they have always done. And then the other thing we are going to make changes for next year, we've done this in the past, just haven't for several years, is we have been very blessed with the number of reading support positions we have in schools at the elementary level. And so we're going to give flexibility next year for buildings to do either reading or math support for those positions, so they can base it off of their building data and really where their needs are to provide that support for kids as well. So those are some of the bigger items on the list that you see here. Other items of significance size-wise?
I want to talk about the math. Sure. So I want to be clear, the math support, which I am 100% in favor of, because losing math strategists, we've had so many conversations about making sure that math support still exists. Can you go a little bit further into, like, every building will have someone dedicated to math support, it's just how much time they spend will be determined by their data, correct?
they have somebody dedicated to it, like
I know-
full-time dedicated?
I
Like,
know some
cannot
could be
say,
half
but
reading,
it could
half
be
math,
partial.
but it's
Correct.
not like a choice of, oh, we want to do this or not. It's a choice of, does your data tell you you need math support?
Yes. So the choice of want to or don't want to isn't an issue. It's more of, does your data show you need additional support in math versus reading? Or is it a split 50-50? Or is it predominantly one versus the other? Yeah, we're going to follow the data. That's why I can't give you a hard number right now, because we haven't even finished our spring testing, much less our fall testing yet. So, but yes, what you're saying is accurate, that our data will determine how much support we provide in the buildings based on the needs of the students in that building. And then the other piece is to clarify, I think most people are aware of this, but maybe not, our level of support varies greatly across the buildings, not because we prefer one building versus another, but based on the size of the building and the needs of the building and who's Title I eligible and who's not Title I eligible. We do have some buildings that have significantly more reading support and now reading and math support than other buildings have. So it's not a completely equitable number across the board for those reasons.
Are you saying then that somebody may be hired not knowing if, or continue in a position, not knowing if they're going to be teaching reading or math or both?
It's possible, yes. Know what you're thinking, but I also know elementary teachers are certified to teach both, and we've had teachers do that in the past as well. So, is that ideal? No, but is it?
I'm trying not to complain here, so.
But thanks for the clarification, though, because I think that's important to know.
I think that's important to note, because that is difficult when a person is trying to get organized for their next year. Where do I put, what do I do over the summer to get ready? Where is my mind at and all of that? And I mean, if somebody goes into it knowing it could be either, that's awesome. If they're okay with that, that's awesome. But I think that needs to be very clear.
That's kind of why, that's why I asked for the clarification.
In that situation. That's all I'm going to say.
Yep.
And then can you just talk about, you know, my conversations, the majority of the math has been with the math strategists, and the instruction coaches haven't played a huge role in the new curriculum. So how are we compensating in terms of making sure the instructional coaches are capable of doing what the math strategists have been doing for the last 2 years? Because that's a lot of knowledge that we have trained the math strategists to have on this new curriculum, and now that they're not going to be doing that work, can you talk about how the instructional coaches are going to cover that?
Well, first of all, some of the coaches, instructional coaches, will have math strategist background. Not all of them, but some will. And others, as coaches, they are trained in multiple ways of providing support for teachers. They're not always trained in a curricular area specifically, because they are trained to provide coaching support for all teachers. So any of our math training supports that we offer, we'll continue to offer supports for those coaches, get them up to speed if they feel like that's an area they need more expertise in. But I also feel like for a vast majority of our teachers, this will be year 2 of this curriculum. So that need will hopefully be diminished to some degree as far as how much support they need as well. But honestly, we have not always had coaches in our buildings. We've never had math strategists in our buildings, and our teachers have always been successful as well. So we'll continue to find ways to support them, and it may have to be a little more creative like we've done in the past as well. But if I can't give you exact training they're all going to take, because they're all going to be at different spots of their background, their expertise, their comfort zone as well. But we're committed to providing that support for all of our teachers regardless. So we'll have to figure out the specifics of each coach and what their content background is and what their training is, and provide the supports to get them up to the speed where they need to be.
And 2 other quick points of clarification that I think are important for you to share. One is, can you confirm and or clarify that the current math strategists will be offered other positions within the district?
Correct.
And then, so they're not being cut from the district, they're just not going to be math strategists in the future?
Correct.
And then the second is that for the reduction in the elementary sections, they're only being reduced in classrooms or in school buildings where we have a abnormally low number of students in those classes. So we're not cutting in a school that has 25 or 26 and making those classes 28, you're strategically going to be selecting what buildings and what grade levels are going to be reduced a section based on enrollment at that specific building and that specific level to ensure that all of the classes across all the districts have an equal average enrollment number per classroom. Is that accurate as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And we do that every year. The last couple of years, we have not done as much of the adjusting of numbers because of the pandemic and trying to keep things low as possible. So this would not be different than what we've done procedurally before the pandemic as well. If there's a building that has, I'll just make this number up, a third grade of 24, we're not cutting that section in that building. It's the where we have classrooms of 18 or 19 right now that if we cut it goes to 21, those are ones we're looking at. So yeah, those will be very strategically determined, and those have not been finalized yet because our numbers are still evolving as kindergarten numbers come in, as we learn if kids are moving in or moving out. There's some flexibility there we have to look at, but that's very standard what we've done to make sure it's very targeted.
What I've heard you say is that you've already identified that there are 8 sections across the district that are looking like they're going to be low enough that you could easily consolidate and still maintain really healthy levels of classrooms.
Yes.
Classroom enrollment.
And like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a 2-year process. Now we are targeting to do all of the elementary sections in year 1, but as you see in the budget piece right now, we're heavy in year 1 and light in year 2. So if we end up only having to do 5 sections this year in elementary, because that's where the numbers work, that's what we'll do, and then the target next year will be 3 more the following year. And then the flip side of that is, if we have a huge kindergarten class come in, we may not cut as many sections, but we also know our enrollment numbers will go up, and then that helps address it as well. So the plan is final, but it's always adjusted based on the ever-changing climate of all the pieces.
2 or 3 of the math strategists retired. Was it 2?
2 or 3, I don't remember which, Barry, off the top of my head, between coaches and strategists. But, yep. So a couple other ones I want to make sure to highlight as well. I'm not going to go through everything on this list, but some of the substantial dollar amount ones as well. We are looking to kind of streamline our custodial department over the course of the next 2 years as well. By doing that over 2 years, again, that'll be through attrition, so we're not talking about people's jobs, just positions of where can we share positions, where can we be efficient with our current resources. So we're optimistic over 2 years we can do that. Looking to reduce 2 central office administrator positions over the course of 2 years. And then the one that's in the year 2 piece, I want to be open and honest with about it as well. Looking to move our elementary assistants that are in general ed to special education assistants in year 2. This is partially a budget driven decision. It's also partially out of a need. We absolutely need to hire all of our special education ed assistants because those are positions of most need for us and they are a priority. We're not always able to fill those right now just with the current job market. So that'll be a position we'll look to adjust as well. So that one may happen, it's listed as a year 2 item. As opportunities come up, that some of those may start in year 1 as well. So there's a long list there, but as you see, everything listed on there total, $3.2 million in year 1, just under $1 million in year 2, puts us at $4.18 million total, which meets our original goal going forward. None of this is fun, but I'm really proud of our team and how we've worked to brainstorm as far as what's best district-wide, how do we protect people, and how do we protect our direct instruction with kids as much as possible. With the loss of ESSER funds, our hands are really pushed to the limit on a lot of these topic areas. So my intent is I'd like to start to share this document, this page, with our staff this week to give them a heads up. Anybody that is directly impacted has been notified already, so they're not being caught off guard tonight. And then try to be transparent with that piece. And then next board meeting, Dave has the final dollar amounts for our budget, and that's the date for us to approve our budget for the next school year as well. So I ran through a lot there. I threw a lot at you at a quick time, but most of this is not new for you. It's just been evolving a little bit over time as well. So any other questions you have?
Shannon, I've got a quick question about the diversity budget. I see there's a $32,000 cut there. What does that leave us with in terms of a budget for that?
Yeah, this is one based on the feedback from our conversations that we had. Originally, that number, I believe, was $57,500.
Yeah.
And that was the contract that we have in place with Nokia. We're not planning to renew that contract, but the reason it's a lesser dollar amount is that leaves $25,000 available for that group as needed, either whether that's a potential somebody come in to do a presenter or a speaker, could be additional resources. That $25,000 has not been allocated or decided at this point, but it is available as the work of that committee continues to evolve.
I would just say that, you know, these numbers are going to be in flux a little bit. You know, there are some things that just can't be known yet. I'd like to see that be a priority for bringing back up to those prior levels. It is a strategic goal of ours. It's, you know, cultivate an inclusive educational environment. It is a board goal of ours, and I think if we make this sort of a central focus of the work that we're doing, we have to finance that. And I think that the diversity committee is not yet ready to do its work independently. So I want to make sure that there is money available to continue with some consultant work because it's just something that committee needs at this time. And I don't want to see it kind of fizzle out because the money is not available.
And that's why I thought the feedback to leave some of the dollars there at least to help with that, since we don't know what that need is yet at this stage made sense. I don't disagree with anything you're saying there, Rachel, but honestly, everything on this list I could say something similar about, and that's the
But we've made that, like, we've talked about that so much, and we have reiterated over and over again that, you know, this is a priority for us. I know that all of these things are important. I don't mean to suggest that one is more important than the other. It's just that we're kind of just getting off the ground with this, and it would be really sad if, you know, just as we're sort of getting started, we you know, are presented with this big roadblock of, well, how do we fund these priorities? So I just wanted to point that out. I do appreciate that number was reduced and that there is money left. I just am saying I want that to be a priority in terms of refunding, you know, just as soon as we're able to do that within our budget constraints.
And you're right, these numbers, there is some flux to these, and there will be going forward the rest of the spring and into next school year as well, too. So that may mean more cuts necessarily, potentially, or it may mean we don't have to cut as deep on some areas, or can bring some things back, too. So yeah, I do think this will be, it's going to be pretty definite this spring, but then as things go on after that, it'll be pretty fluid as far as what gets adjusted after that.
I have one other question. First of all, I just want to thank you for this. Had to have been really, really difficult, and I can only imagine how many hard conversations you've been having internally. So thank you for the work that you've done. I do want to have a conversation about with us going through a transition of superintendent, whether or not this is the right time for us to be making cuts, to not rehire within our communications department. I've got a real concern over us not setting her up for success by not having another person in that role. And so I just wanted to ask about your thoughts on that and what that looks like. And like as we're launching a strategic plan, we're bringing a new superintendent on board. I feel like there's the potential for feeling like we as a board are like setting her up for a little bit of failure, and that doesn't feel very good to me. And so I'd be interested in hearing your feedback and the rest of the board's feedback on, is that is that a bad move for us to make, to have this be the time that we say we're going to hold that position open?
I think it should be left in the budget and I mean, that was a big discussion during the interview. I mean, Amy talked a lot about communications and what that should look like. We have talked as a board, as long as I've been on the board, about communications. So I think it should be left in the budget.
Priorities.
And I think that that should be filled. What it looks like should be left to Amy when she gets here, but I think it should be left in the budget. I think that we've talked a lot about communications, and
I don't disagree with any piece of that, but I know Amy's coming in here without any rose-colored glasses or whatever you want to call it, because Iowa City's going through major cuts as we speak, so she's going through that. If you read the paper yesterday, Sunday, Cedar Rapids is going through it. I talked to a school board member in Solon, they're going through it. Marion's going through it. You know, so this isn't just Linn-Mar just because of whatever. It's not what it is. It has to do with the state funding, like you said, the ESSER funds, et cetera. I don't think, I think Amy will come in and she'll put her imprint on this. I think she'll come in and massage this how she feels comfortable. This is just trying to get us to a point where our budget, you know, we basically have to do what we have to do to get to that point. And as, you know, she's going to massage this as we go through this next year, et cetera. And of course, just like I think somebody said before, this is a moving number. You know, there's no black and white and red ink on this. You know, it's going to evolve as we need it and having to push money back and forth. And the leaders of Shannon's cabinet and all the leaders of all the buildings, they've all spent a lot of time going through this in their brain too, trying to figure out what are we going to do, where are we going to go. And we can all have a pet project that we think should stay in, but I think overall we still have to look at the whole package. That's just my opinion. Not shutting down the discussion, because it's a good discussion.
I don't think you're wrong, but I do think, you know, we have been talking about this for so long, and that, you know, what we're really looking at, I mean, it's easy to talk about it, you know what I mean, in terms of this kind of out there thing, but it's one person. That's what our communications department is, one person for a district of 7,800 students, and I don't think that's fair to the one person who's left to do all of that work. And it seems like we've been pushing to fund that more for so long, and now we're funding it less. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it does feel like, are we just paying lip service to this issue year after year after year?
my perspective, when you set a budget, you are planning for what you intend to do for the coming year. And yes, there's going to be flexibility and you're going to change some of the things, but you are saying these are the areas that we anticipate having expenses in, and these are the areas we're prioritizing, and this is what we expect to fund. If you cut a position and then say, but we might put it back in, that's not budget planning. That's not setting a budget. That's saying, well, we might just change our mind. I think that if communications is a priority for this board, which in every conversation we've had since I joined the board it has been, then you don't cut that and say, well, maybe we'll put it back in if we change our minds. You say, this is a priority and we're going to leave the money there. Maybe we don't spend it in the first 6 months because maybe we don't hire that position until January because Amy comes in and decides what that is going to look like. But if you don't put it in the budget and plan to address it, it means you're not prioritizing it, and it means that that's one of the first things you can move away from and say, nope, it wasn't on the list, we cut that, it's not there. And then we're another year into saying we should really prioritize more into communications, and another year into not prioritizing communications. And yeah, I get a little sore about this because this is what I do, and I see the gaps that where we could do better. And it's because we don't have a full department. We have, as Rachel said, we have one person trying to do the work of more than one person. And I guess for me, I'm tired of talking about this is something we should do. I'm in my 4th year of talking about this is something we should do. So that's where I'm at. as it should. I don't think it should be on the list.
We
But
have 4 different goals on our strategic plan that require significant communications in order to accomplish. Like underneath our strategic priorities, 4 different sub-goals.
At one point, we had 2 people within that department talking about expanding that department. Somehow now we're down to 1, talking about cutting what was our second position. So I truly do appreciate, Shannon, that these, you have a number and it's like, where does it come from? It has to come from somewhere. I can truly appreciate that, and I can truly appreciate all the work that you and others have done in order to come up with this list and try to do it in a way that affects the least number of people. And I think it is something to note that we don't have somebody in that position right now, so it's not like we're having to fire somebody, and that's, there's something to be said about that. But if this has to happen, we've got to talk about a long-term solution to this, and it has to have teeth. And it may look like cutting $70,000 from the communications department right now, but we have to talk about what that looks like in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years, and we need to talk about it in a comprehensive way.
I don't disagree with what everyone is saying here in any way, shape, or form. It is very important, but we also have to look at it as, I know there's been a mountain of hours put into this budget and where these dollars come from, and I'm sure that when it was discussed, those were discussed as well. And if we're saying that we need to remove that from this line item, that $70,000 has to come from somewhere else, and that may be then a person. That may be, I don't know with all of the discussions I had, I wasn't in the room, but it's still $70,000 that has to come from somewhere. So do we make one of these other numbers that seem bigger to do this? It's not a simple answer to that question. And I know with the conversation that I had with Shannon that these numbers have been looked at very closely. And I wasn't in the room, but I do believe that they looked at all of this very closely. I asked a lot of questions, and there was answers to all of them.
my thought would be, and I agree, we have targets, but we're also 10% over our target for year 1 and 2. So there's cushion to say, let's leave it in for next year. Maybe we fill it, maybe we don't, but it's a priority that we need to figure out what we're doing with that department and how we meet our communication needs as a district. And
I can jump in because that's kind of how Melissa started this question for me. I respect everything you guys are saying, and we've had these same internal discussions and struggles with this as well too. So I don't have any reservation about what you're saying or any concern at all. This is echoing our conversations too. But to get to that dollar amount, we had to look pretty hard for things, and that's, I think Rachel brought up the fact that this is not a position that is currently filled. So that is part of the factor that we look at as well. And then I do think with the fact that, as we've talked about, these numbers are somewhat fluid for next year, is based on what enrollment looks like, just all the other expenses by the time we wrap up the budget this year. And let's be honest, since we've started talking about this, superintendent turnover has changed as well too. So I get what you're saying, new person coming in, that's a priority for them, which makes total sense to me as well. Does that priority shift a little bit? I think it possibly does. But I don't think I want to make that decision. These are my recommendations to you right now as far as what we should reduce. Now, I hear what you're saying, Britt, about we don't want to do it and then kind of undo it, halfway do it. I view that as things evolve and change, so we need to do the same thing. Now, if I do think what you were saying there a minute ago is if we decide halfway through the year next year that we really need this position, or give Amy part of the year to kind of plan and see at that point, give her a chance to get her feet on the ground first and then reinvest at that. I think then it comes really down to what does the budget situation look like then versus now. And then you make those decisions at that point. But since we're literally not riffing somebody in a position right now, I think we have that time and that flexibility to see where things play out give Amy a chance to come in and get her feet on the ground and see what she really identifies as needs and priorities at that point, and then she can certainly bring a recommendation back to you at that stage as well. But you asked us to put together a dollar amount and how we get there, and this is what we have gotten to. I knew this would not meet with unanimous, like, yeah, these are fabulous, let's go. That just isn't the way this goes when you're talking about these positions, because they're all important people and important positions, and anytime you're taking those cuts, there is no winners in this spot. So I'll stop talking from there and let you guys.
I'm comfortable. I get it. I agree with what Matt said, that if it doesn't come from here, it has to come from somewhere else. But can we truly, as a board, have a conversation with some meat about, and some teeth about what this is going to look like? We cannot continue to have this conversation where we say, we need to talk about this, we need to do it. We need to do it now. This has got to be addressed. We may not have the money now, but let's talk about what we're going to do when we have the money, so that when the money becomes available, we're ready to go. We have to think about what our communications department looks like as this district continues to grow. We are not a little district anymore. We are a large district. We are the 12th largest in the state of Iowa, and we should not have one person running our communications department. I mean, with all due respect to Kevin, because he does a fabulous job, it's not fair to him. And there's just more work to be done. So I'm comfortable, and I understand why you're making this cut, but we really need to have a plan.
I put my 2 cents worth in. I've listened to what everybody has been saying, and we have this plan of $3,206,000, and listening to what everybody said, and there is no doubt in my mind this is a monumental task that I wouldn't give to my worst enemy to try and do. But if we take that 70,000, okay, and subtract it from the 3,206,000, okay, one, it's going to give us a year to look at and see if we can come up with a better solution. And we can still reach our goal after the second year. But, you know, yes, we are a growing district. Yes, we talk about communication all the time. Yes, it's too much for one person. And I was thinking that this might be a way to eliminate that 70,000 from the cut, put it on the second year, and with the flexibility that we have, we'll get, who knows what might happen then, like Rachel was saying. But, you know, we can deal with it, but that's just my point. I don't know if that is feasible, but it's a solution to what we're talking about now. I mean, it's a possibility.
The other thing we talked about, Clark, is for things in year 2, we didn't want to hire people in for a 1-year position if it's going to be on a year 2 budget cut. I think that's.
But at least if you target it for year 2, then if there are some changes, like we said, these numbers are fluid, then maybe at that time you can really say, okay, we don't need to make that cut. But if you feel like it needs to come in the first year for a particular reason, then.
If we had somebody in that position right now, I would certainly agree with that. But since we don't, that was the different thinking on that one.
So we're not approving these tonight. We're approving these in the next meeting with the full budget, so that gives everyone time to think about things. My concern with what you just said is that we approve the budget with these cuts, and we've already said that there's a a stop on all new FTEs, then don't we have to come back and approve the addition of a new employee, like position next year if we've approved cutting it from the budget entirely? But if we leave it open as an option, we're not saying you have to go hire and you not have to go spend this money, but the conversation then becomes much easier to have. Because if we approve the cut,
some flexibility.
yeah, it provides flexibility. We're not saying you have to go spend this money. We're saying it's there in case we need to do that because of priorities. Whereas if we approve a budget where this is a cut and we've said no new FTEs, then we have to come back and you have to ask us to approve creating that new FTE. And that just seems like...
Nowhere near we said we're not going to do any new FTEs. I specifically say that because if we have class sizes at certain buildings grow, we're going to hire teachers to match those positions. So we're not saying we won't do any new FTE. We'll look at that very carefully and make sure it's the right position with everything as well. But if you guys, well, what you're going to approve on the 24th is the overall budget. It is not necessarily this specific list. This is how we get to that budget based on Dave's projections and our budget numbers we're looking at here. So you can make adjustments anytime you want to during that phase after that is set, just knowing the impact of the budget will have with that. You always have that discretion, and you can work with Amy at that time and say, we still want to reconsider that and put that in there. The only thing I would hesitate is the 10% increase that's in there, the overage. I did not put that in there so we could pull a little bit here, a little bit there from it. My intention for that was to make sure that what we are estimating as cuts actually becomes the real cuts. Because the last thing I want to do is have a $545,000 early separation estimated savings become $445,000. Because those things, we don't know how much that savings is going to be until we finish the entire hiring process. So that's what I was putting the 10% extra in there for, is for those type of unknowns. So we err on the side of caution and not on the side of cutting it too close, and then Amy has to make those decisions right away as she's getting started. So.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You've got the total budget reduction with target as 4.125, but up above the total is 4.188.
Correct.
So do we have more in here in cuts than the 10%?
Yeah, slightly. I don't know what the exact percent would be, but it'd be slightly more than 10.
I mean, that's almost communications department position. I mean, almost exactly.
Say it,
Well,
but it's
like you said, Shannon, there's a piece of this as well that we don't know, because normal attrition, we're going to lose staff. And that's what happens through this process. We had retirees, so we're going to be replacing some of those positions, and we have no idea what we're going to be paying them, how much experience they have and all of that. So that's the fluid part of it as well.
The same with the elementary sections. If we end up only reducing 4, that has a significant difference on the budget next year versus 8. Now we'll catch up to that in year 2, but for year 1, that would be problematic. So I brought this to you as a very careful, conservative way to make sure that Amy's not walking into a budget hotspot next year, because there's still a lot of unknowns next year. We don't know what the legislature will provide funding the following year. We don't know our enrollment numbers yet for next year. So there's a lot of unknowns yet. So we tried to budget as conservatively as we could to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a tougher position. This is a tough position, but if we have to go further in budget cuts down the road, this gets much, much more difficult. So trying to do everything we can to avoid having that be the scenario was kind of our driving force. Do as much as we can now so we don't have to do this again next year and the year after as well.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions about the proposed budget cuts? We have 2 weeks, so if you guys have additional thoughts, share them with Shannon, and we will look to have a full discussion of the budget in its entirety with Dave, and he will ask for our approval at the next meeting.
We will have another finance meeting before that as well.
Do. Yep.
Moving right into Shannon's update.
Well, you get to hear more from me. Some fun things to share. Construction update. The administration building had the public hearing today, as you know. Bids are due tomorrow. So we'll be curious to see how those bids come in, obviously. Plan to bring that recommendation to the board on the 24th. We'll see how those go. I'll keep you up to date this week as those bids become finalized. Tennis courts, they've done some prep work out by the Oak Ridge in the area. Haven't seen the actual real work starting yet. Sounds like that'll happen later on this week, which I hope so because the weather's been cooperative. And the high school stadium parking lot, still planning to begin that work right away at the start of the end of the school year, so we're not interfering with kid traffic. We've talked about her a lot today. I want to formally, in my opinion, welcome Amy Kortmeyer's new superintendent of Linn-Mar. She and I have been talking a lot. I really enjoyed working with her when she and I both worked at Linn-Mar previous times. And I'm convinced all good people come back to Linn-Mar. I'm so glad to see Amy in that role. She and I have, like I said, we've been in contact. We are meeting on Wednesday. We're scheduling times throughout the upcoming weeks. I know she's planning to be at several board meetings going forward as well, too. Really excited for what she can bring to the district and looking forward to that transition as well. So, and then final thing is, Barry referenced this a little bit earlier, the 100-day exit plan that we talked about back in January, I think it was, or February, for my mid-year goal review. As I was going through kind of an update for you, I printed everything in red as kind of an update from what I gave you originally. It's interesting because everything on that list is essentially things we've been talking about tonight in the last several weeks, and somewhat intentional, but as I went back through that and reviewed that, I thought, well, it's good to see that plan is matching what we had talked about. A couple of the key things, facilities, I think you guys are pretty well aware of where we're at with everything facility planning-wise. Budget-wise, obviously we've been talking about that quite a bit on next steps as well. The transition piece, now that we know who our new superintendent is, really that piece becomes much more real and not a hypothetical, which is great for me to be able to work with Amy on that part of it. Strategic plan, got your feedback tonight where everything stands as well. I'm hoping to continue to make progress in all these goal areas to help the exit go as smoothly and the transition as efficient as possible as well too. So as you get a chance to look at things, if you haven't yet, please give me your thoughts or feedback as well. Your feedback tonight on strategic plan, I appreciate it. Looking forward to coming back with a newer, improved version at next couple meetings as well. So, and then I lied. I guess I have one final one too. Just always end with congratulations. Just kind of a really cool opportunity to congratulate the Colton Center Jazz Ensemble. Placed second at the Iowa Jazz Championships last week. I believe that was their highest finish they've ever had as well. So congratulations to those individuals. And Britt already mentioned 10th Street Edition. I know it's not new news, but man, Grand Champion National, that's amazing. So I wanted to make sure to celebrate those two groups as well.
Can I just say one thing? It just boggles my mind that here we are, this district of 7,800 students, which is a lot, but it's not, I mean, certainly there are bigger ones in the state of Iowa that can beat out places where performing arts is kind of their thing, right? New York and California, that we have such talent in this district and such dedicated students, dedicated coaches, that we could be number one in the entire nation. I mean, that is just mind-boggling to me. So I just wanted to say that. I want everybody to really get a sense of how big that is.
Yeah, you can't over-exaggerate that, I
No.
don't think, and how impressive they are. But yet those of us that saw them this year aren't surprised either.
No,
They're just
absolutely not. It was incredible.
incredible.
And the violinist that was on 10th Street, we got to see actually perform when we went to the Iowa School Board Convention. And the versatility in that young man is just phenomenal. I got a feeling we're going to be here for him a long time. But in every category, they're national champions. In every vocal, every instrumental, just amazing.
Any other updates?
Nope, that's it. Thank
Any
you.
questions for Shannon? I'm sorry, I'm just making all kinds of noise over here. Okay, moving on to unfinished business.
I move to approve Central State Bank with an authorized limit of $5 million as an additional depository for the district.
Second.
A motion by Rachel and a second by Sandra. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have our first reading of policy. I don't have any requests at this time to pull anything out, so I can have a motion to accept the first reading.
Move to approve the first reading of the policy recommendations as presented.
Second.
Motion by Barry and a second by Clark. Any discussion?
Yeah, I was the one that brought up the question on the 504 section of the health services. And I know you've had conversations, you mentioned some of it tonight, with regards of the wording of this being straight from Iowa law. I have a couple of concerns with that because there are some changes in the wording from Iowa law to this policy. My biggest one is in the very first paragraph that it says, except in emergent care situations or child abuse assessment, the district will not administer invasive physical examinations or health screenings of a student that are not required by state or federal law without first obtaining written consent of a student's parent or guardian. The section in there that includes invasive physical examinations is not actually in the Iowa law. And the reason that is an issue for me is if we were in a situation again like we had with COVID, what this is saying, and I'm going to say this as an extreme example, but just to illustrate my point, if we get into what is called an emergent care situation, we are now saying in this policy that we as a district can provide a medical examination that involves exposure of private body parts or any act during such examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body without parental consent, the way that this is worded. When you go to read the Iowa law, it does have all of those words in it, but that specific section of it does not have the invasive physical examinations. I really think that needs to be removed from that part of it. It can still be in there like the Iowa law has, but I think that is in the wrong spot because I don't think anyone here wants to approve of invasive physical examinations because of something due to similar to COVID. That is my biggest hang-up on this. My other issue is the fact that the definition of emergency care situation is almost identical to the Iowa Code law definition of emergent care situation, and that's two different things. And we're using emergent care situation in this definition of emergency care situations. It may not seem like a big thing, but I truly believe it is. I would like to see emergency care situations changed to the emergent care situation definition used in Iowa Code. And I've had lots of conversations in the last few weeks regarding policy, and one is that came from some of those conversations is we don't need a policy to follow law. I agree with that. If this is worded exactly as Iowa law, we don't technically need the policy.
It's a mandatory policy.
And this says, can I say this too? This says that we are not going to perform an examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body unless it is required by state or federal law. So we are only going to do that in situations where we are required to do so by law, and we have talked about this over and over again. We will follow Iowa and federal law. So, you know, I don't think that this is not about the district making a decision about emergent care situations and performing invasive physical examinations. This is about saying we will not do that unless we are required by law.
My hesitation with it is this is a mandatory policy.
Yeah.
And we did not write this policy. This is coming to us verbatim from Iowa Association of School Boards and their attorneys based on the law. So I would be uncomfortable us making changes to a mandatory policy that the attorneys from the Iowa Association of School Boards have looked at indirectly with the state law that was passed last spring. To me, that would be more concerning than following their expert advice on this piece. So mandatory policy is pretty clear that what we have to do.
It's interesting you say that, because literally the night after we discussed this policy, the last time I watched a committee meeting in Des Moines where IASB came in and was talking to legislators regarding policy being put into place, and IASB was very adamant that they are not a governing body and cannot require a policy, nor do they put these policies out for them to be used as verbatim. They're supposed to be brought in and the board discuss on how it applies to them specifically.
This is a mandatory law from the state of Iowa, is that correct?
Yeah, it's Iowa Senate File 2080.
Right, so this is the language that IASB has drafted, directed by their attorneys. So attorneys have looked this over and said this is in compliance with the law and that the state requires. So I don't share these concerns, and I'm ready to pass it. So I'm certainly ready to vote on it, is what I meant.
Again, to be clear, IASB said themselves that this is not intended to be done verbatim. This is supposed to be discussed because again, they are not a governing authority of the board.
We're not saying that we have to pass this because IASB said so. We have to pass something because the state said so, and we are going to do that in conjunction with Iowa law, and we have had attorneys at IASB who've looked it over. I'm not saying we're required to follow IASB. We're saying, I think, that their attorneys have looked this over and said this is in compliance with the law. We will take that advice, and based upon that advice, there's nothing within this policy that others are concerned about. So I hear your concerns, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think, it's not like we're doing this because IASB said we have to. We're doing this because we know we have to pass something, and we're taking their advice on what that language would look like.
Well, and the language reflects the law that was passed and signed by the governor.
Yeah.
So I'm rereading it, and the district will not administer invasive physical examinations or health screenings of a student that are not required by state or federal law without first obtaining written consent of the student's parents or guardian. The 3 bullets are simply definitions of what that sentence says. So we won't do these things, and here's the state definition in the law. So we went back, we reviewed it, we compared it with the law. I'm comfortable with this language. It's been vetted by all of the professionals and the legal minds, and we would be in compliance with Iowa Senate File 2080. So I am comfortable with the current language.
Was there communication with IASB's attorneys with the policy committee back and forth asking some of these questions?
No, we compared it with the law, and because we found the language to be the same,
so
we elected not to rewrite it ourselves.
So the policy committee is making that legal judgment of the question that I asked?
No, IASB is, but we're not going to continue to contact them and argue with them. We don't have the expertise. Britt, nor myself, nor Sandra, our attorneys, we are going with the advice of the attorneys. That is what we as prudent members of this board and of that committee need to do, and that's what we have done.
I understand what you're saying. However, we pulled this policy from discussion last time to get those questions answered, and it doesn't appear that they were. I would like to see something, especially in regards to how the invasive physical examinations is added to the verbiage right from the Iowa law. It says it right here, 279.76. This section shall not be construed to prohibit a school district from conducting health screenings in emergent care situations or from cooperating in a child abuse assessment commenced in accordance with the section 232.71b. It says nothing, absolutely nothing about invasive medical examinations. That is a question I think that we should be asking, to ask why is that there? Why is that changed from the Iowa law? The Iowa law does include a definition for invasive physical examinations, And it says, means by any medical examination that involves the exposure of private parts or any act during such examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body, but does not include hearing, vision, or scoliosis screenings.
I don't
yes,
think we
the
should
verbiage-
continue to go
excuse
round
me,
and round and
excuse
round
me.
about
That's
this.
the same-
Because you've
It's just the
continued to say that
definition.
same
That's
thing, and
just a
that's what we're
definition.
saying.
That's exactly
we're
what you
not
just read
going
from the
to
law.
do.
I understand that,
It's
but
right here.
we're adding that definition into what Iowa law says that does not prohibit, or does prohibit, I guess if you want to say it that way. We're adding that in where Iowa law does not specifically call it out. And I have a question on it. That's all I was asking when we got this removed, was to ask that question to the attorney on why it is written that way when it doesn't appear that Iowa code says it that way.
But will you be satisfied with that answer? Because you seem to not trust that the authorities in this area can give us good advice. They've given us the advice, you don't like it. So I guess what I wonder is there anything they could say that would make you feel comfortable? My suspicion is no. And so then what are we going to do? We're going to continue to pull this policy and bring it back over and over and over again?
No, I would like to trust but verify. That is all.
So Matt, help me understand one thing, because you're saying it's not in the law, but when we go back and review, I do not have the law right in front of me. But as I look at this, the part where it says the district will not administer invasive physical examinations, are you saying that part is not in the law?
The definition is, but this is calling out, the very first part of this sentence, it says, except in emergent care situations.
Correct.
So an emergent care situation can be brought up by Iowa Department of Public Health. And again, going back to my extreme example, the Iowa Department of Public Health could say, we have COVID too. We are in an emergent care situation. This policy then gives the district the authority, or the superintendent and nurse, as it's called out down below, because you're the ones making the administrative recommendations or regulations, that you can, in that situation, because Iowa Department of Public Health has said this is an emergent care situation, we can do these invasive physical examinations. That's different than the Iowa law. I just wanted clarification on that.
Okay, I've got the Iowa law. Senate File 2080. Each school district is prohibited from administering or conducting an invasive physical examination of a student or student health screening that is not required by state or federal law without first acquiring the written consent of the student's parent or guardian. That is exactly what the first paragraph of our policy says. Then you go to section 3, and it defines, just as our 3 bullets, invasive physical examination means any medical examination that involves the exposure of private body parts or any act during an examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body, but does not include a hearing, vision, or scoliosis screening. This is exactly what is in this law.
Read section 2. I'll read section 2.
Section shall not be construed to prohibit a school district from conducting health screenings in emergent care situations or from cooperating in a child abuse assessment commenced.
But it
in
does
accordance.
not say invasive. That is the reason I wanted this pulled, was to get that clarification. That's all we're looking for here.
It says it shall not be construed to prohibit us from doing.
In an emergent care situation.
In an emergent care situation, which is what this is saying, is that except in emergent care situations, we will not administer invasive physical examinations or health screenings, which is what section 2 is saying of the law. The law says that this is not to be construed to prohibit a district from doing invasive.
No, it's not. It does not say that. It says this section shall not be construed to prohibit the school district from conducting health screenings in emergent care situations or from cooperating in a child abuse assessment commenced
That's
in accordance with the
literally
section law.
verbatim what our policy says.
No, it doesn't. It says, our policy says,
The thing that's missing in that, it doesn't specifically say invasive physical examinations in section 2.
An emergency care situation is an unforeseen occurrence. We cannot further define beyond this law. We are not going to do it outside of the law. We're going to follow what is required. And in an emergency situation, you cannot predict what that's going to be.
We're not talking about emergency care situation. We're talking about an emergent care situation.
Which is defined as an emergency care situation means a sudden or unforeseen occurrence of an onset
There's emergency
Medical.
and emergent,
There's
which
two
are
different
defined
things.
differently
There
under
are two
that same
different things.
paragraph.
Our policy here is almost defining emergency care situation as an emergent care situation.
Who are we, though, to say that we understand this better than the attorneys do?
Section A.
Rachel, I'm not trying to
Point
be
A under
obstinate. I'm
section
trying to
3.
understand
It feels a little bit like you're trying to be
I'm
obstinate.
sorry that's how you feel, but this is important.
Okay.
Because
Just give me a second, please. Okay, section 3, point A, in the law, emergent care situation means a sudden or unforeseen occurrence. Our policy says emergency care. I would say that before the second reading, we reflect emergency to say emergent, so it is exactly the same as the law, and we move forward.
If I can agree with that, if emergent care is the exact same definition as Iowa law.
The rest of this paragraph is exactly what section 3, point A says. They are exactly the same except for the word emergency instead of emergent. So if we change the word emergency to emergent, everything else is the same.
Can we do that tonight and pass this? Or do we have to come back again?
Was this the first reading? We can make that and
yes,
have
but
it.
this is the second time as the first reading. So is it going to go back and be a first reading again?
No, we can make that change as part of the approval of the policy for the first reading.
There is a caveat there, because this definition, if we just change emergency care situations to emergent care situations, the way that it's written now, that definition would have its own, it would have emergent care situation in its own definition, and that can't be there. So if we can make that definition exactly what the state definition says, then, again, I would like clarification that invasive physical examinations can be under that scope.
Yes.
That's what the law says.
The law says they can be under the scope of an emergent care situation. That is what the law says.
Motion on the table, we have
Please.
a second.
Yes, I'm calling the vote. We will change the one word to emergent so it reflects the one word in the law, and it will go forward as a second reading with that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Open enrollment requests?
Move to approve the open enrollment requests as presented.
Second.
A motion by Barry and a second by Rachel. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I make a motion to approve
No,
the consent.
we have a removal from the consent agenda. So if you could include in your motion all but section 807, exhibit 7.
Hang on. 807.
Exhibit 7.
And what is that?
The Newsela customer agreement needs to be discussed separately.
Okay.
So,
All right. I make it a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of 807.7.
Did you second?
Number 7. Okay.
okay, I have a motion by Rachel and a second by Barry. All those in favor, or any discussion further?
I'm just curious to hear about the Mercy Family Counseling amendment and what has transpired with that, because I think last we'd heard they had discontinued that.
They
This is
have
something
one
different.
portion of their service. This is specifically referring to the 3 emergency visits that are allowed per student. So that
Okay.
is still in place and continuing. Yep.
Gotcha.
But the other part, you're correct. They've
The
discontinued
language on
those
that was a little
services.
bit confusing, so I was
Yep.
curious
Can we
what that was.
also, I'm sorry, you done?
Nope, I'm
I
done.
apologize. Could I get some clarification on what Zello subscription is? What is Zello?
It's the career information system used at the high school and in 8th grade to do the 4-year plans and the career development planning. The counselors, when they were here, they talked about using Zello to craft the 4-year plans for high school students, career planning, the career assessment tools, and then it also comes with career development lessons. It's part of the state of Iowa's ICAP requirements for an individual career and academic plan.
Okay. I appreciate it. The contract just didn't have a lot of information on it, so I was looking for some
It's one of the
clarification.
approved vendors. The state has a list of approved vendors, and we have to pick from that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about the consent agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Matt, you have questions on 8077?
The reason I have concerns with this contract is, going back a year, I think I even sent my concerns a year ago when this was on the agenda on Newsela was used by a lot of legislators, not used, but discussed by a lot of the legislators when I believe it was HF 802 was passed on using some of the materials with Newsela to skirt around that law. And it's been a concern of mine since that it's still being used as such. And I wanted it pulled from the consent agenda to have a separate vote on it. Because I do believe that with the information that I've learned from it, that it can be used, just as I said, to bring in either curriculum or resources for curriculum to violate the HF 802 law.
Can you give some examples of that? Like what specifically are you talking about? That's pretty broad.
I can go back and I can resend you the video that I sent a year ago that explains it much better than I can here.
Well, we're having this discussion here, so I'd like to have some examples.
It has to do with a lot of what the generic term CRT, bringing those sorts of issues into the classroom and a way of bringing those.
Clarify that. Are you saying it uses critical race theory in its programming?
No.
Okay, because that's a big clarification on that piece.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm using CRT as a generic term, as it's become a generic term for using for, let's say, divisive concepts. I think that's the language that the law uses. HF 802 is divisive concepts. I apologize. I should have used that.
Can you give some examples where it's done that? Like, do you have some specific examples of things that have been shared by Newsela in our classrooms that you believe violate the law?
I don't have any specific for here. My concern is one, again, I will go back and find the information that I sent a year ago, and I even had it called out the timestamp of the video where they're discussing Newsela specifically.
They're discussing what?
Newsela.
Okay,
Can you talk about-
I don't want to be.
Just wait for a second. Shannon, can you talk to us about how this is used in the district before we make assumptions on whether or not?
This is a smaller agreement than we did last year. 7th, 8th grade is all we're looking at for Newsela for next year. Part of that is budget considerations, and part of that is we looked at the data as far as which grade levels were using it and where they saw value, and those are the 2 grade levels that saw it as a nice supplement to their social studies curriculum and led to age level appropriate conversations. We're not looking to renew it district-wide like we had in the other grade levels. So,
what do they use it for in social studies? How is it used?
Give them current, I thought, like current events kind of thing, so they know what's going on.
It's an encyclopedia of news, what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's encyclopedia, but yeah, more of a current events update with
I know, that's an old word.
conversations.
Encyclopedias don't really exist.
Is this a time-sensitive thing that we have to approve at this point, or?
No, we would not have to. But
Is there
I
a
guess the
reason
question I would
not
have for Matt is, you said you brought this up a year ago, concerned about the potential impact from what had been shared, I don't know, nationally, whatever. Have you had any concerns brought to you this year for us specifically with this program at any grade level?
No,
much less 7th, 8th grade specifically? Because I have not heard any. If there is, we need to address that.
The reason I'm bringing it up, again, is because the same concerns are there. Do I have specific things that are going on at Linn-Mar? No, I do not. However, the fact that our legislators were using this supplemental curriculum, if that's what you want to call it, as grounds for some of passing HF 802, I believe should give us cause to stop and take a look at it. That is the only reason I'm bringing it back up.
It just feels like it's sort of this nebulous accusation against, not necessarily by you, but by legislators or whomever, against this company, but again, no specifics. It's just very nebulous, like, oh, this is bringing in these divisive concepts, oh, it's bringing in critical race theory, but give me an example. And I can't say, oh, I'm not going to vote for this thing because there's some video out there that draws, connections between Newsela and divisive concepts. There's no examples of it. It's just what legislators say, and I have to say, I always take what the legislators say with a grain of salt because they're politicians. So without something specific, without something with some teeth, there's just no reason to get rid of something that the district's been using, it sounds like with some success, and you guys are happy with it, teachers are happy with it, so I don't understand. I'm still looking for a reason why we wouldn't approve it and specific examples of things.
The video I sent is teachers and administrators talking about Newsela and how they're using it.
I want you are here. You, Matt, are here as a board member.
I'm not in the classroom, but Rachel, I'm not pulling this out. I have a real concern. This is my
I understand your concern. I know, hang on a second.
We have the concern, we have the counter. I think we have two options, so I'm looking for a motion. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve 807.7.
Second.
A motion by Rachel, and I have a second by Melissa. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving 807.7?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Next up is board communications. We are coming up on, we have some committee meetings in April. A reminder, April 20th is the Foundation's Dine Out for Schools Day, so if you're looking for an excuse to go out and have dinner or lunch or breakfast somewhere, that list of places will be coming out soon, I'm sure. Our last two board visits, Indian Creek is on April 20th and Lynn Grove is on May 4th. The Medco Luncheon is coming up on May 3rd. So lots of things in May, of course. It's not on the calendar, I did want to ask, we had talked earlier after winter break, ISB is doing a Student Success Summit at the end of April. Is anyone planning to attend?
Is that the one in
Yeah, it's
I've not heard
the
from anybody that they're
28th,
planning to.
I think the 27th and 28th.
27th and 28th, I believe.
If anyone is going to decide to go, we should please let Gayla know soon so we can get those.
Something that's not on the calendar is the 27th of April is a venture meeting. Sandra and myself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Venture meeting.
Venture
You're on the
committee.
venture committee.
And that is, Barry?
27th.
Yeah, the day.
4 o'clock.
4.
It's a committee.
It's committee
It's not
clerk.
like a presentation or anything. Sandra and Barry represent us on that. All right, anything else for the good of the cause under communications calendar?
Yes. Well, not on that.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to bring up one last thing on 10th Street. Former student of mine went to that as a parent, and he said what most people don't hear about is that after all is said and done, all the kids that were there, I mean, all over the nation, went to this 4-story complex just to have a good time. And they were intermingling with all these different groups from several different states. They had a great time. They took over the whole place. All these kids that
I saw the line dancing pictures.
that were engaged in this. And what a classy way to those kids to let their hair down, so to speak, and have fun and meet all these other individuals in other states. And he said it was just amazing just to watch the intermingling of all the kids and how much fun they had after everything was all said and done.
Right. We will move on to audience communication. At this time, I will call those who have signed up to speak to the microphone and podium in order of your sign up. The board will receive and acknowledge comments, but will not engage in a dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda for the meeting. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and should be shared in a respectful manner. James Thacker.
James Thatcher, Linn-Mar School District member. I changed everything tonight after I heard you guys. Matt, thank you for standing for what you're standing for. I'll tell you what, you guys not only do not know the law, you're not doing your job. What I'm going to quote back to you that you said was, this is verbatim with Iowa law. Are you serious, verbatim? Let me read the Iowa law, because I got it. I sent you guys emails on this. Here's Iowa law. This section shall not be construed to prohibit a school district from conducting health screenings in emergent care situations. What your policy says is, except in emergent care situations or child abuse assessments, this district will not administer invasive physical examinations or health screenings of a student that are not required by state or federal law, etc. That is not verbatim. I don't know how you figure that. The next step is your job is to look at what's there. I've served on boards myself. Mine isn't to be a rubber stamp to everybody that submits everything. I've submitted to you stuff. That doesn't mean you rubber stamp what I do either. But I've done law for 21 years, and I've mentioned that before. And when I look at this, the exception in Iowa law is number 2, which is what I read, and it accepts healthcare screenings. You, with your law, accepts invasive physical examinations or healthcare screenings. You have 2 things you're accepting. Iowa law accepts only 1. So parents that are out there, j.thatch, T-H-A-T-C-H, @msn.com. I'll be happy to send you links to the Iowa law and links to what this is, because what they're telling you is not true. And that's what frustrates me. You guys need to tell the truth. And you said also, I believe it was Britt, I'm not sure, you can go back and listen to your own stuff here. You said you can't change a thing. Then you turned around and changed emergency care situation to emergent care, which was the right move, because that term shouldn't have been in there either, and I sent that on email. That was the right move. But you guys are adding to law invasive physical examinations that Iowa law does not allow, that you are. And like I said, I changed my whole talk, so the next time maybe I'll talk the other stuff. Thank you.
Tiffany DeBow.
Hi. I am a parent in the district. First off, the communications and whatnot talk, I'm not totally there on what's going on, but I do know that when you did the feedback survey from the stakeholders in the districts, one of the top things was communications. So I think it's important to remember that that is what the people of the district, when you asked, said they want. So maybe make sure the money's there to pay for it. Like they said, you don't have to use it if you don't need it, but don't take it away just because you can. I wanted to come out and take you a minute to say thank you for your actions regarding this past in March, when laws changed regarding access to bathrooms and changing areas for transgender students. I've seen comments on both sides of the spectrum. I've seen people say that you should have stood your ground and that the statement you released was not strong enough. And I've also heard other people celebrating and feeling vindicated in it, that it changed the policy that you passed last year. I want to acknowledge the fact that you are in an active lawsuit regarding this very issue. Anything that you say can or do can be used in that lawsuit. So I personally appreciate your actions and your measured statement that prioritize protecting the district and, excuse me, not making any sort of political statement. At the same time, as you've kind of touched on, this Iowa state law is in conflict with federal law, particularly Civil Rights Law Title IX, and the Supremacy Clause of our Constitution states that federal law takes precedent over state law. So unfortunately, you all are between a rock and a hard place, swinging back and forth while the state and the federal court dukes this out. So I realize that you made a decision that puts the burden on changing law where it needs to be, which is on the citizens, the state, and the federal level, not on the school district. You are not activists. You are not to set us up for lawsuits. If you get pulled into them, that happens. Clearly, you know that. But I appreciate that you did not do any activism and decide to stand your ground and just wait to see advice from legal counsel on how this compares to the federal level. And I just hope that going forward, people will realize that this could still swing back and forth, because The federal law, your lawyers could say the federal law takes precedence, you gotta go back to that. There could be a lawsuit that gets filed that now there's gonna be an emergency injunction that makes you guys have to go back to the old state law and the federal law. So I think all of us as a district, we need to all remember going forward, this is still back and forth. And as you've shown in my several years in this district, you guys are very about adhering to the law. Even when I didn't like it, even when masks were removed and I didn't like that, you guys did it. And I wasn't happy. One of my first meetings, I came in here guns blazing about it. And I apologize. This was my first experience with the school board. But your job is not to be activists. And I see it. I hope other people in the district see it. And I just wanted to take a moment to call that out and to thank you for protecting the district, even if it's not with what you agree with. Thank you.
Amanda Rink.
Amanda Rink. I have 2 children in the district, 2 little boys. I'm lucky enough to spend a couple of hours a week volunteering at their schools, and I wanted to tell you about a few recent experiences I've had. Indian Creek is lucky to have a level 3 special education classroom, and during Spring Picture Day, I witnessed student support staff go to great lengths to help the photographers get the best possible pictures of their students. They used all of their tricks, kindness and patience. You could tell how well they knew their students. And I think to myself that this is the staff, these are the people I want supporting my child if they needed it. Last week I was helping in my son's first grade classroom. The students were learning about measurement. They were tasked with using a piece of string to figure out if the desk's height or width was greater. They were partnered and let loose. Some students stood for a moment stumped. Others started to stretch the string this way and that way. At first, no one was too sure how to use that string to measure their desk. After a few minutes of watching her students, the teacher leaned over to me and said, "It would be so easy to show them how and give them the answer, but there's learning in the struggle. 20 years ago, we would have done this differently, but now we know better." I looked over and 2 students worked together and figured it out. They put one end of the string flush with the one end of the desk and stretched it to the other. They held the length of the string, compared it to the height of the desk. There was learning in the struggle. And the students were so proud of themselves for figuring it out on their own. What I don't think everyone realizes is that volunteering in our schools allows you to see all the good that is happening. A lunchroom cashier acknowledging each and every student who comes through her line, calling them by name, looking them in the eyes and asking about their day. A teacher giving a silent thumbs up to a student to let them know they made a good choice. A band director on his hands and knees searching for a missing retainer. Ask me how I know about that one. In all of the disagreement, I don't want it to be lost that Linn-Mar is full of good people. Kind, flexible, understanding, inclusive, compassionate, adaptive, generous with their time and talents kind of people. Adults who are pouring into our kids each and every day. We're so fortunate to send our kids into buildings so full of people, so invested in their success, their safety, and their happiness.
Katie Lau Lancaster.
Thank you. I want to share today what I have learned as a child, a youth, and how I am a thankful graduate of Linn-Mar Public Schools. Today I call myself not only a graduate, but a parent and a grandparent. What I have learned. We are each uniquely designed to be one part of a dignified, respectful, and inclusive community. I learned that message from amazing educators, coaches, directors, mentors, and all the support staff who poured into me their gift of teaching, leading, and encouragement. I learned that at Linn-Mar Public Schools from my classmates who, although they had different life stories than my own, who graduated alongside of me, they too were seen, heard, and valued. And together we were taught to treat one another with respect for the entire community. I want to continue to use I statements today and not speak for others, but speak to how I am a part of this larger community known as Linn-Mar Public Schools. I am but one of 9 Linn-Mar graduates in my childhood family. My eldest sister was in the first class to enter into kindergarten and graduate from Linn-Mar. A small start of 38 students or so that has now grown into an amazing school system that it is today. I am the partner to a Linn-Mar graduate who was the first to enroll at the Air Force Academy and eventually became a physician who has served in this area for 20 years. I am the mother of 6 Linn-Mar graduates and 1 son and 2 daughter-in-laws who are also Linn-Mar graduates. They are amazing partners and parents. They are doctors, nurses, writers, singers, lawyers, audiologists, and today even one serves as support staff at Linn-Mar Public Schools. I am confident in the quality, the dedication, and the exclusive education that I and my family have received. At the heart of our education was ongoing dialogue, rather than monologues disguised as dialogue. And together we learned the joys and challenges of how we encounter one another. I am thankful to educators who not only taught me how to read, but librarians who provided me with guidance to select materials that would open my eyes and enlarge my understanding of a much larger world view. They taught me in reading and being together as a community how to be welcoming and compassionate to all my neighbors. From this place of confidence in the Linn-Mar district, I say thank you to this public school. I ask the school board and the Linn-Mar community that you stay the course.
That's 3 minutes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy Wendell. Okay. Vanessa Reno. Thank you for the phonetic spelling. I appreciate that. I feel terrible when I mispronounce your guys' names.
I'm Vanessa Reno, mother of 3. I have 2 in the district right now, 1 that's graduated. I have sort of a testimony to what the elementary directors that were here earlier tonight that presented said. When my youngest was in kindergarten, we discovered he had developed an anxiety disorder, ADHD, and sensory processing disorder. School had become extremely difficult for him. As parents, our lives turned upside down with the constant fear that his classmates would reject him. This feeling has ebbed and flowed throughout the years. We began multiple therapies to help him, including occupational, physical, speech, music, aquatic, play, and vision therapies. Our parenting styles adapted to his way of learning. His teachers also adapted. Support from teachers and admin were abundant, as was daily communication. Staff was with us through a 504 process and eventually an IEP. Over those years, I'm sure teachers had several days or weeks where it might have felt depleting. It can be emotionally draining caring for one child with special needs, not to mention multiple children in a classroom. They never once made us feel judged or less than. We were embraced. This was not lost on me then, and it certainly isn't now. I have always been appreciative for the equitable learning experience my son has had and continues to receive. Counselors, teachers, reading, executive functioning and math supports, admin, all who have played a part in his success have been at Linn-Mar, and I thank you. He is succeeding. As for friendships, he's doing well. One friend that I know has been loyal and real is all because of a chance meeting on the buddy bench at the Indian Creek Playground in kindergarten. I'm so grateful. And I just have a little note that Mrs. Hogsey was in the video tonight and was his kindergarten teacher. And if you're listening, thank you. Because of this experience, I'm also extremely empathetic to all other children's needs and have a deep understanding of the importance of social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In light of the current Iowa legislation and the possible changes to education overall, I hope Linn-Mar continues to be a great public school district where all children can feel like they truly, authentically belong. Thank you.
Mercy Stumbo, and I apologize. I don't think that's right.
Great, I should have done a phonetic spelling. Sorry about that. I'm Cersei Stumbo. You were right on. Resident here in the Linn-Mar School District, wife of a Linn-Mar school teacher, and a grandmother of toddlers that are on their way up. I'm also co-lead of the Marion Alliance for Racial Equity. So I come tonight to acknowledge the work that's been done in support of students and staff,
who have historically been marginalized, in particular students of color and LGBTQ+ students. In my professional role, I often talk about how critical it is that we support the most vulnerable students and staff, yet vulnerability is not the only way to describe Linn-Mar's powerful, inspiring, and highly capable students, families, and staff around whom schools have not always been organized. I am in awe of them, and I am inspired by them. The Marion Alliance for Racial Equity will continue to engage and amplify their voices for continued positive outcomes for all students and staff. I'm here recognizing this is a time of significant churn with legislation and budget issues that sometimes feel targeted at public schools, with shifting staffing, including the superintendency, not to mention everything that comes normally with April in a school year. So it's a time when we acknowledge all of the hard work of the staff in support of our kids. Our public schools continue to be a source of pride, as we heard earlier, and just now, as I had tears in my eyes here. Moving forward, the Marion Alliance hopes to see the district enact a spirit of continuous improvement in support of the values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Marion residents support these founding ideas of our American democracy and know that living up to the express commitments takes time, energy, knowledge, expertise, and care. We encourage the board to stand in support of Linn-Mar's students, families, and staff with diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, and justice in mind as you continue to review your policies, strategic plan, expectations, and in particular your investments. Thank you.
Jensen.
Good evening. My name is Derek Jetson. I'm a parent in the district. My wife and I have graduated 2 alum, one at North Carolina and one at Iowa, and we currently have a sophomore. All 3 of our kids have been very involved in the vocal music department, including show choir. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for recognizing all 3 show choirs and the middle school show choirs a little over a month ago during the board meeting. Had them all in here on YouTube. And then also with the comments tonight from Clark and Shannon. I personally have congratulated Mr. Bugowitz, Mrs. Anderson, and Mr. Jorgensen for the success that they have had this year. And I also want to thank the administrators, Dr. Gustafson and Kim, for their continued support of the program. But you can't forget Brian Cruz and the transportation department with the buses and the trailers loading all that gear to go to these competitions. So 10th Street's results in Nashville were outstanding. It's an opportunity that those students got, they'll never forget that weekend. And the work that those kids have put into this show since last August is reflected in the results from the competition and the individual awards that some of the soloists received as well. But I want you to know that the way these students conducted themselves that weekend as representatives of themselves, their family, and of this district is what I am most proud of. And I was there to see it. On Friday night, not the party night was Saturday. Friday night, preliminaries are over. We know they are going to perform on Saturday morning. Most of the other groups that were there staying in the big hotel, they were at the water park. The kids are relaxing, they're having downtime. Our students, this team, spent 2 hours in an empty convention hall practicing choreography. They knew their work was not done. Saturday night was the party. Friday night was a work night. Saturday morning before 10th Street is getting ready to go on stage. We are off stage right at the Grand Ole Opry. They are in hair and makeup. These soloists have their microphones on. They are waiting to cross a yellow line to go on stage, but the group competing in front of them had to come off stage first. That group's from Alabama. Very good show choir. Lots of sound and lights, lots of expensive tech that was on stage, and it was our crew getting ready to set up after they were done. Closest competitor, 2nd place after preliminaries, and there were a couple of judges that actually had them scored higher than 10th Street. They're walking off stage, we're waiting to go on. What do our kids do? They cheered for them. They congratulated them. There was a whole series of high fives and hugs between a group of high schoolers from Alabama and a group of high schoolers from
It's
Iowa.
3 minutes.
Because show choir is awesome. Thank you.
Geraldine Jones.
Well, like Jim did, I had something planned, and I'm still going to touch on that, but I also have some other points that I would like to touch on as well. Matt asked a question about Newsela, and you jumped immediately to critical race theory. There's something called cultural responsive teaching that you probably should familiarize yourself with, because it's not an immediate jump to critical race theory. So I would definitely familiarize yourself with that and how that is in our schools. So you wanted specific examples from Matt on what is in place for our schools. I would challenge you and ask you, have you reviewed the curriculum, Newsela? Have you reviewed it yourself? Have you reviewed it in our schools and familiarized yourself with the Newsela curriculum and how it's being used? Can you confidently say that there is no critical race theory or cultural responsive teaching? If the answer is no, again, review it yourself. I have 3 topics that I have emailed on that I reach a certain point in their communication where you just stop responding. I'm asking for a follow-up or an answer, and if you say I have no comment, that's an answer. That's what I'm asking for. Not responding, I'm not sure if you've heard of silence is acquiescence, but it's basically admitting that you're not protesting what I'm stating, and therefore you're saying it is true. So I'm asking that you familiarize yourself with that, and either respond to my emails or you're admitting that it is true by not protesting that. In my 3 comments that I have, or my 3 emails that I'm still waiting that I followed up on this morning on. One being the the new audience communication procedures, and what your goal is for that on the public, I have no idea. I asked for the process in selecting the stakeholder teams for the superintendent search and what the criteria was sought for during the determination of that process, and who was determined to be a good fit for these teams, and if everybody was vetted the same way. I did hear that some people just had to send an email and other people had to go through that application process. I sent an email, asked to be on it, and I didn't get that same treatment, I should say. I also heard that, a lot of people, actually both of these teams really wanted Nick, and we ended up with Amy. So I'm asking how you came to that conclusion, and maybe just some discussion that you can, give to the public on a statement for that. Why we decided to go with one when the stakeholders said the other. And third, I asked about like the third parties that the district shares information with, and whether the student or parent information, teacher information, or any of the survey data that has been collected. I asked this back on February 1st, and it is now April. So I've been at this for a lot, I don't know, February, March, April. So almost 3 months. We're going on 3 months, and I still don't have any response, or maybe a list of who we are sharing that
That's
information
3 minutes.
with. Thank you.
It is 8:17. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Rachel. I have a second by Sandra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.